Oh, I forgot about the location. So I told her if she calls during the meeting, I can't talk out and I step out the car. What I'm going to do when she's in Australia.
You know what the thing is?
Of course, I had to bring that up to you too. Since you're in Australia, you don't have one.
You're going to have to pass this down back to him.
Okay. Do we have a quorum?
We do. Fine.
I can't count. So, good evening, everyone. A little bit early. I'm going to call the meeting to order, but this meeting is a public session of the Council Rock School Board Directors. This meeting is being recorded by the Council Rock School District and may be recorded by members of the audience. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Bialik?
Here.
Dr. Foster?
Here.
Mr. Grupp?
He is away on family business.
Okay. Mrs. McKessie?
Here.
And Mrs. Sexton?
She'll be arriving shortly.
Okay.
She was detained tonight.
Okay.
Not detained. Delayed.
Delayed. Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mr. Abramson?
Here.
Mrs. Brooks?
Here. Superintendent's report, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Let me begin by introducing members of the Council Rock Education Foundation, most particularly Ms. Jill Shurtleff and Mr. Fred Bauer, and they have a presentation of a special award this evening. Welcome, Jill and Fred.
Thank you. I stand here tonight as the principal of the class of 2013, Council Rock South. We'd like to thank the school board and the Council Rock Education Foundation for allowing us this opportunity to recognize and to memorialize our beloved Mr. Moore. Just 6 weeks prior to completing his 25th year as a social studies teacher at Council Rock, Rick Moore lost his battle to cancer before he was able to see, as he so often told me, the best class of kids ever, the class of 2013, to graduate from South. As their class advisor, Rick Moore worked tirelessly with our officers to ensure that our class raised enough money to make sure that our events were both memorable and well attended. He set the bar high. He was as successful and skilled at leading a class as an advisor as he was in the classroom. A student shared that Rick's classroom was a refuge, a place to lower one's shoulders, and that Mr. Moore just didn't teach about the study of fundamental problems. He helped us to overcome our own, both academic and personal, by teaching us to think about our thinking. Mr. Moore was respected and loved by many. He was a humble man with a sometimes gruff demeanor, but his eyes were never brighter or his smile ever wider than when he was with or talking about his family, Lorraine, Ricky, and Ian. I'd like to thank Ian and Lorraine for being here tonight, and most especially to Lorraine for all the help that you provided to our class as well. After Rick's passing, the students wanted to find a way to honor his memory. In lieu of class and other gifts, the class of 2013 chose to use the remaining funds to create these memorial grants as a legacy to Mr. Moore. Specifically, they wanted to honor his love of social studies and his appreciation for the special education services that were provided to his son Ricky at Council Rock. Through the support of the Council Rock Education Foundation, the Rick Moore Memorial Grants have been established to support the use and integration of technology in the area of social studies and to support the pre-vocational training needs of our students with special needs. It is our hope that through these grants, the memory of the many gifts that Mr. Moore gave to his students will continue to touch the lives of others in our schools and serve as a tribute to the tremendous impact his teaching, His love and his leadership has made on us, the class of 2013, Council Rock High School staff. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Suzanne Ray, the Executive Director of the Council Rock Education Foundation, and once again to thank CREF for providing us the ability to honor Rick in this way. Thank you.
We're just going to announce the 4 grants that totaling over $6,000 that we're announcing tonight through the Rick Moore Memorial Fund. And will the two of you stand up in front? We'll call up our announcees. The first grant is for the Satellite Student Store transition project at Council Rock South with Kelly Korn. This project serves low-incidence disability students, grades 9 through 12, and these students in the life skills and intensive learning support programs will learn practical vocational skills by partnering with the student store and operating an independent satellite store during the lunchtime periods. So just stop for a quick photo. Congratulations, Kelly. Thank you. The next grant is for the project Conover Academy Online. It's a grant to the Council Rock Achieve program. John Engelhardt is here tonight. Come on up, John. This is a vocational project for the Achieve program, and this project is for the students to develop the skills necessary to transition from an educational setting to the real world by practicing a variety of tasks in the area of service, office skills, assembly skills, and functional personal skills. Congratulations, John. The third grant is for Jim McNeil and Colleen Senf. Colleen is here today for Council Rock North. This grant is focusing on social studies on the below grade level students that struggle with writing. These classes will incorporate new technology to create an end-of-the-year U.S. history documentary video using Surface iPads to create, compose, edit, and store information for this final video project. Congratulations, Colleen. And finally, this last grant is for Goodnow Elementary. Lynn LaBerge is here tonight to accept the check. This is the iPads to facilitate language and functional skills for our 4th and 5th grade students with autism. Encouraging language development through visual images prompts is already a successful technique being used throughout our autism classrooms. This project will utilize the iPod technology to help students learn to use scheduling apps, list-making apps, and calculators during their day-to-day lives. And resources will enable teachers to help students build skills out in the community as well during their community-based instruction and in the school environment. So congratulations to Lynn. All 4 grantees, please come up. They want one last picture, and then we'll be. Thank you for your time, for the Council Rock School Board directors, and for the opportunity to honor Rick Moore's memory in this way.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Congratulations to all the grant winners.
There you go.
While the photos are being taken, I just want to say that as a member of the Board of Directors of the Education Foundation, I'm always excited and pleased when we can give money to innovative programs for our students. But as a personal friend of Rick Moore's for many years, I can't tell you how much these grants really embody the essence of what Rick was all about, what he was passionate about, and so it is just a double win to honor him in this way. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
A couple other announcements, and then I'll finish the superintendent's report. The first one is one of the reasons you practice is to make sure you get it right. And we had to practice a couple times to get the EduLink calls correct to our school community. So Matt, would you give an update on the EduLink calls tonight and our success rate?
We did launch our 3rd attempt at reaching all the numbers we have in the system this evening at 6 o'clock. And as of right now, it's made over 17,320 phone calls with 909 calls left to go. I did double check the system, and it does look like that this time it's working. It is reaching all of the phone numbers we have in the system.
I think I got them all.
All 17,000?
Yes.
We've transitioned to a new provider because Global Connect sold their business last year, so the EduLink program is the one that will wake you up at 5:30 in the morning when we tell you that there's a school closing or some other emergency notification. But it's good to practice because we didn't want to have this problem in January when we were calling our first snow day. And I'm saying January specifically because I don't want to see any snow in December or November. But Matt, thanks for your good work, and it looks like we've finally figured this all out. Again, there should be instructions on the front page of the web to let us know if there was a problem with getting your phone calls, and if so, contact your school office. They'll contact registration, and we'll make sure we get the phone calls right. I do also want to announce that we were down for about a day early this week with an email issue that was part of a server issue and just a problem with the way that the email server was done. I commend Matt and his team. They reconfigured the email server, brought us back up. We did lose a couple emails from Saturday to Monday morning. And again, we just remind folks that if you sent an email to a staff member in Council Rock over the weekend, we may not have been able to get them because of the restore. Make sure that you've touched base with that staff member to make sure they got their things. If you're waiting for a response and you send it on Saturday and Sunday, it could be that the email server just didn't give that email back to the staff member. I want to announce two programs that will be held at Chancellor Center. The first one is a highlight of our Envision Math program. It's our elementary math program, and Mrs. McClendon and her team will sponsor a program and invite parents across the elementary spectrum to come and see the Envision Math program and talk about the various elements of the program. It will be held here on Tuesday, October 21st. That's next Tuesday, beginning at 7 o'clock, and it will be right here in the Chancellor's boardroom. We also are sponsoring a program on the PA Core Standards. Monday, November 3rd at 7 o'clock, there will be an informational session for parents on the recently adopted PA Core Standards for Math, English, and Language Arts. This program will be held here again at the district's administrative offices, the Chancellor Center, in the boardroom. It will be an opportunity for parents to better gain understanding of core standards and their implementation, as well as to get answers to questions they may have. Council Rock has invited the Deputy Executive Director of the Intermediate Unit, Dr. Mike Masco, and representatives from the Department of Education to help lead this session. We invite questions in advance of this forum, so we've set up a special email account, standards at Council Rock School District, standards@crsd.org. If you have a question about the core standards and how they're implemented in Council Rock, send us that question at standards@crsd.org, and we'll make sure that question is passed on to the facilitators of this session. While we get a chance to see Council Rock Education Foundation, that gives me a chance to also plug this Thursday, October 23rd, a week from today, will be the first session of this year's speaker series. It's entitled Building Resilience in Children and Teens, Giving Kids Roots and Wings. It's part of the Raising Great Kids speaker series, which is a collaboration between the Council Rock Education Foundation and the Council Rock Coalition for Healthy Youth. That program will feature Dr. Kenneth Ginsberg, who will lead a discussion and a Q&A on building resilience in children and teens. Dr. Ginsberg is a nationally recognized expert on adolescence and the best-selling author of Building Resilience in Children and Teens, Giving Kids Roots and Wings. He lectures widely to national and international parent and professional audiences and has appeared on The Today Show, NPR, and the nightly news programs for all three networks. Dr. Ginsberg is a pediatrician specializing in adolescent medicine at the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania and is a professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. This event is free and is open to our entire school community. There is, however, a request on behalf of both organizations for parents to register an RSVP. If you can do that, please. It's not required, but we'd appreciate it. Log on to www.creducationfoundation.org. You'll see the link there, and you'll be able to RSVP on that website. This has also come out a number of times on our listserv, and it's a direct link. You can just click on the RSVP link, and you'll be able to do that. It sounds like a great program. Parents are strongly recommended to consider spending some time with us next Thursday, October 23rd, to hear Dr. Kenneth Ginsberg speak. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. That's the superintendent's report.
Moving on to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching the broadcast on CRTV. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of the community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. I don't have a list, so if you'd like to speak, please come up to the mic, state your name and your town. Doesn't matter,
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Brossman from Richboro. So I was the lead for Plan 3 of the Planning Committee, and I feel like as a head, maybe I failed a bit. I didn't underlie our assumptions on the title page of our plan, and our assumption was everything we were doing was to get the trailers offline. This isn't a sexy thing or a huge newspaper title, trailers off, to some it seems, but to the community, this is a big deal. It feels as if the big headline reading, closing a school, is more sexy, but if you take the trailers off, it is a total of 37 spaces. Richboro Elementary having 7, Hillcrest having 7, Rolling Hills having 6, Wrightstown 5, Richboro Middle 5, and Newtown Middle having 7. The trailers don't have a running budget per se that you can look at and say we'll save X amount of dollars, but we recently spent $200,000 to remediate mold gross in these trailers. So in my mind, you save the upkeep on these trailers, and it's also a lot of money as compared to closing a school. And the trailers, or as in our Sunny language, we call them modulars, were originally a short-term plan. They were to go up and come down as projections were that enrollment was peaking and would come back down in the certain close years. That was almost 20 years ago. The promise that we would take them offline in a short period of time are 20 years overdue. These trailers represent an immediate positive change to our district and our community. It's obvious that trusting projections got us into a bad situation with these trailers. At that time, if we had added on to Richboro Elementary and Hillcrest, we would not be in the difficult situation we are in now, and maybe these additions would already be paid off. For individuals thinking about the financial impact this trailer situation has on our community, I will say that there are numerous houses for sale in my neighborhood, most of which were original owners and some of which have not had any remodeling done. Historically, property values were held by the reputation of Council Rock School District. The quality of our school district now is, however, being tainted by the negative perception of these trailer homes attached to our schools. Some young families don't want to do the work to remodel an older home and see our schools as not aging well either. Remedy the trailer problem and help homes continue to be valuable enough to renovate. You spoke at one meeting about discussing the commonalities of the 3 plans from the Planning Committee. All 3 of these plans were working to get trailers offline, and in the original charge of the board, number 4 states, remove all trailers. Because of the charge you gave us, you asked us to consider demographic capacity for all students, future adaptability, and anticipated changes in school curriculum that may support full-day kindergarten, special education and adaptations, and alternative education with continuity and preservations of neighborhoods. Please remove the trailers. All 3 committees agreed on removing trailers. Plan 1 states, and I quote, eliminate trailers. Plan 2 states, recommend the removal of trailers district-wide immediately. Plan 3, eliminate temporary classrooms and move classrooms inside the building. Somehow, removing trailers was not the focus after plans were analyzed by the board. I understand that removing trailers is easier said than done. And keeping with some of the original school board charge, we recognize that. Getting trailers off means adding on to schools in some capacity. Sometimes you have to spend money to save money. Getting trailers off without adding on to schools would mean you put children in atypical classrooms. Again, fancy words for closets, storage spaces, most of which had no natural light, have retrofitted heating, and are on the outer walls of school buildings, making them more affected by the weather. This is not quality education from best practices that you can find on research on the internet. You cannot justify to our community closing a brick and mortar building to put kids or programs into the trailers. Judging by the homes for sale in my own neighborhood, enrollment numbers may very well change in the coming years, and I would hate to see us make a mistake and get rid of spaces we will need in the future. The other issues of closing a school, getting out of the LSAT lease, selling Howe or 20 Ford were to get the money we thought we needed to renovate, remodel, and rebuild these facilities in the face of the $130 million we need to keep our schools going. LSAT has a lease that is very high. We need to be creative and thoughtful with the programs in this building, but this, in combination with other ideas, can save money without putting kids back in trailers. It seems there is a sense of mistrust in some of the underlying numbers by which these decisions will be made, And as a board, maybe you should first agree on enrollment numbers in each school and use those to move forward with decision insight. I would also like to say it's very easy to slam the efforts of a person presenting a plan. It is very hard to come up with a plan in the face of all of the needs of facilities, kids, and programs. And I ask that you treat our superintendent, who has experience at every level of our school, with the respect that his time and tenure deserves. I did not enjoy watching us describe whether or not he should present his plan. You may not agree, but agree to disagree respectfully and hear each other out. And finally, I really feel that your legacy as board members is to get the trailers off. It will make a huge positive difference to the value of our schools and help property values hold. We will be very proud of this board if on November 6th you could vote to take trailers off.
Thank you. Next person, I did get a list. Heather, you were first. Amy Fitzpatrick, Ivyland.
Good evening, Amy Fitzpatrick, Ivyland. First, that was amazing, truly. Thank you first for your time on the committee. I hope that members of the community and the board have expressed their utter gratitude for the time you guys put in to try to solve some incredible problems facing our district. And I absolutely believe that it is a lot easier to bash a plan than it is to come up with one. So, kudos. I wanted to say I appreciate the commitment of this board to transparency, and I, like a lot of parents, have a hard time making it here every week. But I've grown to love you all, and I like seeing you every week. And I really do spend my Saturday mornings with a YouTube video while trying to feed my 1-year-old, occasionally pausing because I can't hear it over the volume. I'm not sure what happened last week, but I haven't had a chance to watch the video and would very much like to. In addition, myself and a number of people in our community would really love to see, even if the video is not able to be put up, the PowerPoint slides, the maps. I think all of us are mature enough to understand that this was a model that Mr. Klein presented. So if it's being held back for any reason because you're worried people will latch onto this for good or for bad, don't. We're all very mature. We understand this is a model and that over time things may change, but the model is important to have as a tool in this discussion. I think Mr. Klein's vision statement was an important step in this board solidifying its goals for the district. A next step might be the board agreeing upon a desirable capacity for our schools. Without this criterion established and agreed upon, how is the board or the public supposed to evaluate the various redistricting and/or school closures? Many parents would argue 100% capacity is foolish and that we will pay for that risk later. And I would like to know if Wrightstown students can fit into area schools without reaching 100% capacity or beyond. I was disappointed to learn that Mr. Klein's model for redistricting removed our small collection of Northampton residents from its Wrightstown community. I think to reach the right decision on specific redistricting lines, you should form a committee that is open to community feedback. A computer model is never going to be able to explain the historic and real-world ties that one block or neighborhood, or in our case, multiple square mile community has with another. I would like to continue to advocate that our Northampton students in Wrightstown be kept with their friends and community and allowed to attend Wrightstown, or in lieu of that, Newtown schools. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. Fortunately for me, I was in the room and I was able to hear the presentation last week. I very respectfully disagree with what was said and done. Nobody in our committee that recommended the closing for Wrightstown would ever recommend that students be put in a school where they could not fit. We looked at it 4 different ways. When we looked at the number of sections at peak, they fit. When we looked at the peak enrollments, they fit. When we look at the Shader 2012 existing capacities, they fit. When we looked at the 100% capacities, they fit. And I must remind you that the 100% capacities are not their full-time equivalents. For instance, Goodno's full-time equivalent is 1,075, which includes filling every room and every special ed room. That is impossible. Schrader's 100%, which is possible, is 920. So the 100% capacities are possibilities because the schools have so many rooms. When we looked at the number of large rooms in the 3 schools, there was 111, and we only needed 96 sections, classrooms for all the sections we currently have. So every way they fit. The projections that Mr. Klein gave had Soul Finestone in 3 years going up 8, Newtown going down 3, and Goodno going up 75. And he had Newtown and Soul Finestone above a 100%. I would not recommend that, and we did not recommend that. The Goodno going up 75 was based on a development that is coming online. Unfortunately for me, I live in that community, and I'm very familiar with that development and all the developments that feed into Goodno. The Walden Square development testified based on a Rutgers study that they did, that there are only going to be 18 school-age children going into the public schools over a 5-year build-out, according to the Pell study. The only developments coming online are apartments above where the Acme used to be, which were supposed to be built in 13 and 14, and they're just building now. And the Walden Square development was supposed to have 8 homes, 8 homes, 8 homes, 8 homes, and 4 homes over successive years till 2021. By the time they start building the homes and they're finished, some of the kids will be out of Goodno. So I have for the board and the administration the study that was done, that they will only have 18 students, and the Pell study that tells you when these buildings are supposed to come online, and both are very delayed. I was told by Newtown Township Information Officer that the Walden Square development doesn't have its building permits yet. It has approval and it has permits for doing subwork, but not the building permits. So to delay, to keep seats open for something that is coming in a distant future and is going to be gradual is, I still stand by the recommendation. So thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Jenny Schottmiller from Wrightstown. I wanted to say that I read the administration's vision for elementary schools on the website that was posted last Friday, and there's a lot that I like in there. I love Council Rock. I have since moving here. What we do now works, I think, very, very well. So I agree with what he wrote in there. And it's supported by the research. The research says longer grade spans are better. Fewer transitions produce better outcomes for students. But if that's all that mattered, then we would all do K-12 schools, because that's what the research supports. And we don't. And we have some good reasons for not. The research says 7 to 8 is not a good model, but we make it work in Council Rock, and I reflect what I feel what other people have said. I love it. This last week, I was curious. So how do these other school districts perform that do these other types of grade configurations? So the handouts I'm giving you, there's a small 2-sided one and a larger legal-sized one. The 2-sided handout shows, I picked out a couple of top-performing school districts, or school districts I would say perform as well as Council Rock, just to see what happens with their grade spans. I looked at PSSA scores, SAT scores, college readiness scores. Downingtown School District is a very similar size to Council Rock. This last year, they added a 6th grade center. Springford, which is very similar in size to our south area of our district with 1 high school, although a larger economically disadvantaged population there, performs very similar to Council Rock South. Upper St. Clair School District, which you might not have heard of because it's not close to here, very, very similar in size to the north area of our school district. Same demographics, same statistics, very, very similar outcomes. They have 5th and 6th grade centers. 2 of the schools on that sheet have 5th and 6th grade centers. Another one has 4 transitions, one of them in high school, and one just added a 3rd transition and 3 transitions. So the larger spreadsheet that I'm giving you also shows, if I take all the school districts in Pennsylvania that perform about as well as Council Rock, where better than 90% go to college, very low dropout rates, high SAT scores in the same ballpark as our district, PSSA scores in the same ballpark as our district, their grade spans are all over the map. Most of them are 6 to 8 schools. Some of them are 5 to 6 schools. Some of them have way more transitions than even 3. So I encourage you to look at that, and I really encourage you to vote on November 6th to redistrict this district. It is much needed to redistrict, and that as you go through that process, just keep your mind open to other grade spans that might be more efficient, maybe even much more efficient, that could free up money in the budget for other expensive district initiatives. What these handouts that I gave you tonight show is that other models can work, do work. We could consider them, and if we did, we might save a lot of money. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Moving on. I'm sorry.
Hi, Gina Yarnell from Rolling Hills. I just wanted to say one thing about Mr. Klein's proposal, and again, I thank him very much for taking the time. And I have to agree with our first speaker. It is a little disheartening to sit here and listen to everybody kind of down him when he is just doing his job, but I'm just sitting on from this end, not your end. So, but I did want to say that too. But as for Rolling Hills, there are more trailers than are in use. From what I understand, there was only 1 classroom in the trailers at Rolling Hills, a 4th grade classroom. And there is a plan out there that I would be happy to email and share that was just kind of reassigning the use of some of the classrooms so that we could get that last classroom inside the building. I guess I kind of want my cake and eat it too for Rolling Hills. I really hate to see us go and lose, I think it was like 90 students with the redistricting. I feel like we are going to be so much smaller than the other schools, and I'm afraid that, because we have less students, would we get passed over for, different things. For as long as I've been there, which is 17 years, if I did say that last time, we were supposed to be on the list to get improvements and to get those trailers removed. I would love to have those trailers removed. I had 2 of my children were in the trailers. My son, I doctored him all year for allergies, and he never had allergies. So I'd be thrilled to get those off of there, and they were supposed to be up a long time ago. I can't help but think that if we had stayed on the list to have our renovations done 17 years ago, that we wouldn't be here talking about closing Rolling Hills. But that's kind of another here nor there at this point, but it would have been nice. So I do think, I'd love to see us stay open, keep the amount of children that we have at our school. And again, like I said, I really want my cake and eat it too. I really would hope that some money from the district could come in and give us some improvements, because we really do need some improvements to keep Rolling Hills open. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on. Before we do our discussion item, I've been asked to move the agenda item about high school courses up because we have a number of guests here in regard to that. Is that agreeable? Does anybody have an issue with that? Okay, so high school courses is item number 2 under board approvals. And Mrs. Brooks, if you could read that motion.
I move to approve the following 4 new high school courses: Honors Marketing, AP Accounting, Accelerated Calculus, and Honors Latin beginning in the 2015-2016 school year.
Second. Mr. Desko, any updates, thoughts, any questions from Mr. Desko?
Yeah, these 4 courses were brought to the Academic Standards Committee meeting last meeting with a request to bring to the full board for approval. The curriculum coordinators in each of those areas are here. If you have any questions, we attached a memo to the agenda to give you a brief overview as to why we are requesting inclusion of these courses beginning in the 15-16 school year.
just like to say that I think these are fantastic additions to our educational program. Each one of these courses fills what I think was a very big gap in our offerings. It opens up opportunities for kids that will significantly improve how they choose courses along the way. So I'm very happy to approve this.
I would agree, and I had several of my children took the Latin in particular, so adding the Latin course is very, very good. Latin's a dead language, but it's a language that helps kids if they have any struggles in English, and they recommend to take language, but then you can't take, so you couldn't take more than 2 years originally, and then it went to 3, and so now this is a great addition, great work. Anyone else? Any other comments?
Yeah, one of the things I'm reading in the memo about the AP accounting course is contingent upon the release, the release of this course by what, the College Board?
Correct. At this point in time, they're in the final stages of review for that course, so this could be delayed by another year if that approval's not done in time for us to include in our course selection process.
So would the motion have to be contingent on that? I guess I'll look to the solicitor because we're approving a course that may not be permitted.
No, I think the motion is fine. I think that the memo educates the board as to the process, so I think the memo is fine. The motion is fine, rather.
All right, so we won't have this course if you don't get that release from the College Board, despite this motion.
We won't have it for next year, but we would put it in place as soon as the College Board does approve it, if the board's accepting of that.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing no objection, I ask the secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. So thank you, those of you who are in the audience for that purpose. We are glad you attended. Please feel free to stay. We'll go back to our agenda and move on to our discussion item. I want to make a note that we had some, for those who were not there last week, we had some significant sound issues, obviously, with primarily, I believe, the board mics. And I do believe, Mr. Klein, that your presentation was audible, so perhaps we should look to put that piece of the presentation up, if it's not.
It's no problem. We've segmented that out. We're happy to put that up if you want.
Is that agreeable to the board? We won't have the public comment because it was just noise and our comments, but...
You can put it up, but you also won't have board comments.
Right, I don't know what to do about that. I mean, if you don't want it up, you can...
When you put something up and there's been board comment about it, and then...
Well, there wasn't a lot of board comment afterwards, honestly.
There was
Some, couple.
We can put the whole piece up with a disclaimer that, you know, it's not completely audible, but you can make
I'm not
pieces
making the
out. It's
decision,
just
Mrs.
working
Sexton. I'm
hard.
asking the board what they want. We had some people ask about his presentation. I don't personally have any objection to putting the presentation up, but it's up
It doesn't make sense to put up what doesn't show well.
Is there a way to put a link to the minutes? I mean, the minutes are the official record of the meeting. Is there a way just to have the video with a link to the minutes if people have questions?
Video with a link to the minutes. I'm not a tech person. I don't know. Matt? Could we post the video, and we always put the minutes up anyway, but...
Well, we put the minutes on our website, but the video is on YouTube, so I
Yeah.
think the default for most people is YouTube. So my question is, since the minutes are the official record of the meeting, and there's no,
Well, the minutes don't get posted until we approve them, and we're not going to approve them
That's
until...
true.
That's true. That's true.
I want to say that I recorded the meeting, and you cannot watch it. It's unwatchable. It's
I
a
haven't seen it,
very
so
irritating, you know, if you might want to say, like, let's be a little patient and I'll wait until I can hear something.
Oh, even the
It's-
presentation? I understood the
No,
presentation was
the
audible.
presentation was fine, but anything before and after the presentation, in a spotty fashion, you might be able to hear it, but I gotta tell you, I mean, even for me, because I was really interested in rehearing things, I couldn't even hear in the room. So there were certain things that I wanted to get clarification on. Did I hear that right, or whatever? It's not, you can't view it. So I would not support putting the whole thing up, even though maybe
I just
someone would
think
be more patient
someone
with
in
me.
the audience asked about the presentation
Right,
piece,
if
so...
you want to put up the portion that is audible, which was Mr. Klein's presentation, it would definitely need a disclaimer of some kind to make it clear that, you know, this is an out-of-context clip. So I'm not, you know, I'm all about being fully transparent, but I'm telling you, it's not watchable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's what I understood from other people.
Yeah, I'd almost rather see the disclaimer say, be aware that you won't be able to understand it, but put the whole thing up there was a public meeting, it's public record. If you know, let people make that decision versus us. That'd be my opinion.
I have a concern of editing a public meeting.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm telling you,
I
you need some
understand.
kind of comment there because it will take an extraordinary amount of patience to
I
go
think that
through
makes
it.
sense.
So
Because
could we-
it's long periods of just buzz.
Post it on YouTube with a comment under it that says, we understand there's some audio difficulties on this, that the minutes from this meeting will eventually be posted on cresd.org. I mean, they will get there at some point. I mean, is that acceptable or?
Sure, but isn't there a way that we can approve the minutes in a
Do you have the minute, or the minutes
faster
aren't?
fashion than
We have
normally
to
do?
attach them to an agenda, which if we could have them done, we could maybe do as an item next
Well, we
week.
meet, seems like every 2 days, so.
Yeah.
We can certainly get
Mr.
it.
Bilek, what are you trying to say? You're sick of seeing us? Okay. All right, so we'll post it, we'll put a disclaimer on it, we'll ask the secretary to get the minutes together that we can potentially pass them next week, even though it's not a normal meeting. We could review that, we'll put them out there.
I had difficulty hearing the names of people who spoke. Some of them.
We'll do the best we can. If we get corrections, we'll get corrections. The only way we're gonna know is to post what we think, and so if you came and spoke and we get your name wrong, feel free to email us and tell us and we'll correct it.
Posted after we approved it.
Well, we generally post what we're going to approve, and then we post it as official
Right,
record
but I mean
afterwards.
post on- right.
Yeah, just I meant post as it's gonna be an agenda item, so if somebody sees it before we pass it, they could email us and tell us, like we normally do. Then we can pass it next week, and then it'll be up on the board. That seem like a reasonable plan to everyone? So, Mr. Frederickson will post the whole meeting with a small disclaimer. That would be great. Okay, so now that we have that complicated issue underway, we are moving on to Mr. Klein's presentation of some other things, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Klein.
As a matter of putting together information that was developed on our Saturday meeting and providing information to the board, what was due this week was a number of different facets, removing modulars, some discussion about a repurposing of and removal of programs from the Law School Mission Program, some repurposing of the Council Rock High School North to move some programs into available space, and at least a very brief reference conversation to Twining. So I want to start with removing modulars, and I'll keep spinning some of these things. There will be some connections between the two that I think are necessary. When you're talking about removing modulars, you're talking about storage issues. When you're talking about removing some storage from LSAC. So you've got some issues that are that actually transcend over top of 2 or 3 of these different issues. When we talk about removing modulars, I'm going to talk about removing modulars at the elementary level first. We haven't talked about the middle school pieces. Some of that waits a conversation that I believe will happen next week about what our middle school plans are and where we're moving there. But there are available modulars at both of those schools. We are taking some of the modulars off in Newtown Middle School as we speak, and there are existing modulars at Richboro Middle School. But tonight's plan talks about what would happen if we took the available modulars off of these 4 elementary buildings. That's what's left of the modulars that we had across the school district years ago. 5 at Wrightstown, 7 at Richboro Elementary, 7 at Hillcrest Elementary, and 6 at Rolling Hills. So if I start with the Wrightstown Elementary School, the current use of the modulars, and again, I want to just preface all of this and begin to say, this is just the administration's proposal. It's one opportunity to take a look at how we're using modulars and how we could begin, actually, how in 15-16 we could eliminate all of the modulars that are in place. And we're talking about some program changes, some modifications in grade level structure, and some internal modifications to be able to do this. So in Wrightstown, with 5 existing modulars, we really use those modulars to their peak capacity. We have kids out there all the time. We have programs out there all the time. We've split a couple modulars to accommodate these outside uses. If we were to model a closure of these programs, we would have to do some significant work at Wrightstown. To make that work, we would realign, our proposal would be to realign grade levels at Wrightstown to make Wrightstown a K-4 facility. We would move students in grades 5 and 6 to Newtown Elementary School. There's some symmetry to that works well for both schools. At Wrightstown, when you actually look at this plan now, you right-size Wrightstown Elementary School. You have vocal music back inside. You have your guidance and some of your other programs inside. You're able to accommodate each of the classroom sections from grades 1 to 4, and it fits with the number of kids in there to about the 90% capacity that's part of the Schrader study. It fits inside, and we would take those modulars that currently work with kids and move all of those programs inside. At the same time, we could in-house a lot of the Wrightstown, the 5th and 6th grade kids, at least for next year, to make it part of Wrightstown, to keep their principal working with them, to have a learning support program right there, to use the counselor and all of those different ancillary programs and services for Wrightstown, and sort of keep them, at least for next year, right within an area where you could maintain an identity to some extent. I would expect over time we would want to assimilate that if you looked at this proposal and adopted it so that the 5th and 6th graders became more a part of the Newtown Elementary School, and that certainly could be modified for next year too, but this would just be our initial thoughts that for this initial transition we would keep those kids, those teachers, and that identity in place. We would let Mrs. Fox supervise that group. We would have the learning support teacher move over there. It right sizes, that's a pithy term, I'm sorry, but it moves 100 more kids over to Newtown Elementary School and puts them within their 90% capacity and pretty much uses all of the available capacity. This isn't very easy to see, but if I go across and identify 6, 5s, 4s, 3, 2, 1s across Newtown, this is the only classroom space that opens up as not being used for a full-time classroom space. These two classrooms continue to be the multi-disabilities classroom spaces, and all of the SGIs now turn into learning support spaces. No full-time class is used for any other purpose other than housing kids. So you really put Newtown to its upper limits in terms of the way that it's being used, and it would fit exactly the way Newtown was built. At Richboro Elementary School, there are 7 modular units, but 3 of them are really storage or PTO use right now. The large group of those, the clusters of work that's out there is the humanities program, an office for the guidance counselor, some ancillary services, speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and the instrumental music program. What we would recommend for Richboro is to take off, do some programmatic changes there, and open up 2 rooms. In opening those 2 rooms up, we could put humanities in one, we could divide up the second one for services, and we would actually open up another room down here that could be an office for the guidance counselor, and we would put then these modulars offline. All of our proposals, at least for next year, would keep 2 modular units on each of the buildings to allow for storage and other capacity uses until we could actually model some of the things that we need to do to find the right storage spaces in Council Rock, because we'd be recommending taking off one of our primary storage and receiving places over at LSAC. That'll occur later in the presentation. So in this model, we would be able to take off the modulars that have those exterior programs in them and bring them all inside. To the point about atypical spaces, this, at least initially, these proposals do not take off all of the atypical spaces. There may be an opportunity as the programs actually move out to be able to move some of those programs out of places and move them into more typical classroom spaces. But as of right now, Hillcrest and Richboro most specifically will continue to use some of those atypical spaces for programs. At Hillcrest Elementary School, there are 7 modulars. 4 of those modulars are used for programs, reading, learning, math specialists, and English as a second language. It's ESL, it's ELL, but there's students that need to have specific help to actually assimilate into the English language. If we did some programmatic changes there, it would result in the removal of a program and the available space inside to actually take a new classroom space, move it there. We could, and all of these programs, by the way, all of these models were done by the principal. So they were challenged, if you were able to open up a classroom space here, how could you actually move those programs inside? And at Hillcrest, you could do that by using this upper classroom here, moving this space here, and using this space here to actually build all of those programs inside the building. You would take off these remaining modulars and you would keep 2 as a storage. Rolling Hills presented a more unique issue because there was really not a lot of work to be, not a lot of availability to change things inside. So you had to actually go and take a look at some creative interior use. I think that was both Mr. McClay and Mr. Smith, the former principal and the current principal, began to work on that early this year. So you're talking about modulars that have a single 4th grade class outside, the math specialist, the humanities program, a general music, and an instrumental music. I wish these were a little bit larger, but if I can walk you through Rolling Hills, here are the 3 pods. These are classroom spaces that approach the front of the building. Here's how you enter into the office. What we would do to take off these modulars outside is move music back to the stage. That's where music was for the majority of the time Rolling Hills was open. The stage was actually built as a music room. We may have to do a little bit of soundproofing in there because adjacent to the gym, you're going to have kids singing over top of kids playing, but it's possible to do that. There is a small space right here that could easily be used for instrumental music. The 4th grade class would come inside and displace the learning support class, and the learning support class would come over to here, which is a very nice space, and they could split learning support programs in both of those places. So the interior use actually fits pretty well. We'll take these 4 modulars off and keep these 2 left as storage. I spoke about this before, but in doing this, we think we can move 17 modulars offline for the 15-16 school year, keep 8 modulars in place, 2 at each building, to accommodate some storage uses, some excess of general supplies, science storage, things like that, as we start to modify where some of our storage places would be in the school district, with an ultimate opportunity or ultimate plan to move those remaining 8 modulars offline for the following year. So that was modular reduction. Aligned with that, we're talking about a realigning of programs at the Law School Admissions Council. So this is the LSAC building, the Law School Admissions building. For those of you that don't know, it sits on Penn Street across from what is the new Law School Admissions building. It was the older building. It came offline, I think, about 15 years ago. Council Rock was lucky enough to align with the Law School Admissions Council to use this space, and we signed a lease 8 years ago with Law School Admissions to begin to use this space for some of the utilization needs of Council Rock that we weren't able to put in our regular facilities. And so if you look at this, Penn Street is out here. You enter the Law School Admissions through this lobby or through a really nice entryway over here that has a nice statue. You come into a cafeteria there. It now houses our Sloan School, which is our alternative school, and the Twilight program that occurs after school. In this area right here, we house a number of ancillary offices for some of our curriculum coordinators and the Network Operations Center, which comes from here, and with offices for our technology folks, our data folks, the people that are our technology, our server controls, and the webmaster, various elements for our technology staff. Walking down this hallway here, this is where the Achieve program is now housed in 2 really nice programs. This actually used to be the secure area where they created the law school admissions test, and we built those 2 areas now for office areas that house the Achieve program. In addition, we are, for the first time that I know of in Council Rock, we have warehouse receiving space. So when we took this on, we actually have 3 bays here that we use, and we're able to drop ship large equipment purchases and paper, most specifically, house it here and then distribute it out to the schools. There is a savings to having a single drop ship point to this warehouse that we've been able to take advantage of for the past 8 years. In the past, we would have drop shipped to all of the schools with 15 different places. So that's the LSAC building. Those are the 4 spaces, the 4 uses we talked about. So the first thing we would talk about, and what we're trying to do in design, is eliminate at least half of the use of LSAC for next year, with the potential of eliminating the rest of it for the following year. But we have to find the right spaces for where those programs would go to. And we've heard articulate comment at the microphone about not just turning the Achieve program into this space, or the Sloan program would not work into a school space. We have to spend some time finding the right places to that, and I think we've done some initial work to begin that process. So the first thing we would do is take shipping and receiving off. We would eliminate that use from LSAC. We turn over that space back to Law School Admissions Council. They're interested in taking back some of that space and using it themselves and for another tenant. The problems with that is we would create, again, this storage dilemma in Council Rock, not insurmountable, but that's a place where we do that drop ship, where we hold equipment, paper, salt during the winter, things like that. So it would result in a small but worthy of noticing difference in the way that we actually would be able to bring in furniture and paper, and a cost differential that would add that. And I will have some cost information that I'll ask Mr. Reinhardt to help me with. But we think we can do that, and we think we can live without that until we actually look to reframe a facility, whether it's Richboro or another, to actually create a centralized receiving place. I'm going back to this facility now, so this would take this part of the facility off. Now I'd be looking at this part of the facility, and we take off between here, here, and here the potential of about half of that space. We'd be talking about also moving out of this part of the space, which is the Achieve area. But we wouldn't move Achieve out. What we'd be talking about doing is repurposing the Network Operations Center and moving it now to Council Rock North, where we have space, and moving Achieve up so that they could have the same office space just further up where Matt's team is now. Same opportunity, same basic place for Achieve for next year. We would eliminate that back space then, turn that over to LSAC, and allow the Achieve program to basically exist in its same format, same form, just up a little bit and closer to the cafeteria and to that side entrance. We would transition over the course of that year the network operations staff to Council Rock North. So when I look at this, this is the Network Operations Center. We could use these. There are actually 4 or 5 small spaces here that were meant for small offices that could be transition spaces for our network operations staff while we move Achieve from here to there. Again, office space and exactly the same sort of configuration that this was here to this space here, with the eventual hope to move the Network Operations Center in total out to Council Rock North. It's the timing issue that I would say to you right now in our proposal we're just not sure about, because we would have to go out and secure bids and reallocate that space at Council Rock North to a Network Operations Center. But this space, and this space could eventually be turned over to LSAC, with this space here, with a delineation right here, becoming a space that LSAC would take over, and they would use existing uses here to start to take over that space. The Network Operations Center then would go over to Council Rock North. So it would take all of these offices and some ancillary offices that we use for curriculum coordinators. The Network Operations Center would go to a north design that I'll show you in a minute. Finally, the last use that's there is the Sloan use. And I wish we didn't have to move out of LSAC, because of all of the uses that we have. Sloan is the best suited for that place. It really has been a wonderful place for Sloan, who has been for a long time in places that were atypical and not necessarily fit for that alternative school. But when they moved into that space, it really was an ideal opportunity for them. It looked like a school. There was a cafeteria there. It allowed for kids that had anxiety about going to bigger places to become comfortable in that place. There was space to be able to have kids in small group as well as large group. We would begin, along with the Achieve program, because Achieve fits well in that space too, to begin in 15-16 to really look for alternatives to these places. We've made some initial forays and some initial conversations with exterior organizations like Bucks County Community College that might be interested in partnering with us, but it's still too early. It's very early to say whether we can work that out. But everyone that we have talked to early on this has been interested in partnering with us. So I'm hopeful that over a course of a year, we can have those deep conversations with folks and begin to look, along with getting feedback from the constituents that are there, teachers, kids, and parents, about where the best place would be to make these moves and to put kids into places where they still would feel successful and feel like their program fits what they're doing at that point. So the Sloan Twilight program and the Achieve program over the course of 2 years would be a place where we would search for homes for. That didn't make sense. So we would search for a home for each. So in so doing, we have all of this space now. We'd be looking eventually to move up to here. Whether we have to move out of there completely would be a decision both in terms of cost and what law school admissions wants to do with this facility as the 10-year lease ends in the 16-17 school year. Bob, I'm going to ask you to help with this. This is the first slide that talks to some of the operational cost savings. So, Bob, why don't I let you go through that, pull the microphone down, and just talk it through with us.
Sure. As we've discussed before, I want to make sure you understand that this is an ongoing savings. So I am just comparing numbers. When I look specifically at the activity, I look at energy. Right now, we'd be spending $40,800 on energy that are going to the modular units. If we would take off the 17, we would no longer spend that. So that would be a savings that next year, if you looked at it and everything was the same, we would not spend that if the modular units were off. Cleaning savings is the same thing. Bottled water is the same thing. And we are leasing 2 modular units still, and we would no longer have to pay for those lease costs either. So there would be a savings in taking the modulars off of $95,150. Reducing the space at the law school admissions, we pay, it is a net lease, so we don't just pay a rental cost, we also have to pay additional operating costs, and that changes from year to year. Snow removal and grass cutting and things like that, so that could change. I used last year's amount as an estimate, $608,000. If we would give back half of the space, we would be able, I would believe, to negotiate a reduction to $304,000. Again, until we do this, I don't have specific numbers, but it is something that's in the ballpark. The additional costs associated with copier paper, which is, I think, the biggest issue we have here, is right now we get tractor trailer loads that are able to be held and distributed out of LSAC. Right now, the elementary schools don't have the capacity or space to hold on to, huge amounts of paper. So there is about a 7.2% cost difference when you have to bring a truck in and not have a full load, if you will. And I project that to be a cost to us of about $6,300. So in total, if you look at both situations, I am saying ongoing costs would be about $393,000 should we do this. So that would be savings from one budget to the next budget. We would continue to see those savings because we wouldn't budget for it again if we went away with it. It's not additional savings, but it's continued savings. And I just want to make sure you understand that, because the next slide is going to show one-time costs. Questions, I can tell. Andy?
Yeah, it's not real meaningful, but $6,000 extra dollars associated with that move. I imagine we spend at least that much trucking it from LSAC to the different buildings. I mean, so we wouldn't have to do that anymore, right?
That is a very good point. I can't tell you this person just does that because he's going from building, but that's part of his job, and there could be some cost savings there, and I will not disagree with that.
And when we budget for upkeep of those modulars, do we have a line item budget that you could then turn around and say, hey, we don't have to budget for that anymore? I know there's going to be cost avoidance by not having to keep them up, but
I think what has occurred is there's not specific money budgeted there, but we spend money when we need to spend money on there. If they're small projects, you don't see it in, we don't ask for the capital. If it's large projects, we ask you to take it out of the capital reserve. So there's a combination of things happening there.
Yeah.
Remind me of what we just spent on mold mitigation for the modulars.
Pardon me?
Can you remind me on what we just spent on mold mitigation for the modulars or for the trailers?
It's around $200,000.
Thank you.
your analysis up here is removing all modulars and not keeping 2 per site for storage.
Keeping them for site, we would still have energy in there, but I haven't included anything there. This is just for the 17 units, so I've netted that out.
All removed.
Everything except the ones that, these are 17 removed, we're still keeping 2 at 4 of the sites, I think.
So this is assuming what Mr. Klein said, 2 per site?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead.
What energy, other than lights, do we still heat these modulars? Or-
We heat the modulars, and we have to
For storage?
cool them. Yes, and we have to cool them in the summer because of the mold issues that we've had, that we have to keep them cool in the summer, not to 68 degrees or anything, but we have to keep the moisture out of the areas.
So what are we storing in there?
For any of these schools right now, we would be storing science supplies for the elementary science program, extra textbooks, some general supplies. Right now, in some of those buildings, there just isn't any interior space to put an extra desk or chair that might be necessary. Where we've had the ability to keep things like that in a centralized storage area, we don't have that anymore. We might want to re-examine the potential of some other storage spaces or to rent some of that space, but for right now, while we're trying to figure this out, those are the things that actually go in there. It's mostly equipment, extra desks and extra chairs for kids that move in any given time. Science story, the science program, which usually takes up the majority of a modular because it's a hands-on supply intense program, and then just the normal keep of general supplies, paper, things like that. Okay? The last strand of this program is just what we've done on Council Rock North, and this is very early, but it reflects the work that Doug and Matt have done with Susan McCarthy and the team at Council Rock North, Barry Desco, to just talk about what it would look like if we began to repurpose available space at North. And so I apologize for this. I thought we would have something a little bit better. It looks a little bit like hieroglyphics if you're sitting in the back. So let me just try to orient you. This is the bottom floor of Council Rock North. Here's the auditorium. Here's the cafeteria. We're going up to the gym and auditorium here. So that the main entrance is coming in this way. These are offices, classrooms in the first floor. Over on this side is the Tech Ed program. This is where we have the places where we would do drawing, wood shop, those kinds of things, know your car. We have spaces over there that we would propose to take over. This being the Network Operations Center itself, where we would put the rack space and the servers and the things that Mr. Frederickson uses on a regular basis to make sure that our email and all of those things are working right. And then over here, we would repurpose these 2 spaces to become interior office spaces. We could use partitions and cubicles to actually begin to move the people that are responsible for this space over here. And we could do that so that it's at least immediately adjacent here and you're still within the opportunity to be in and out of here. There are some other costs associated with this in terms of renovation. We have a large generator that we use at the Network Operations Center to make sure that if power goes out, the network stays up. That would have to come over to North. There's a lot of different costs that would be involved in moving that center over there. But this looks like it could be a good space and a permanent home for the Network Operations Center. So these are the costs that we're looking at as a one-time cost to actually move all of that over there. And there's some modular piece on here too. Bob, let me ask you to talk about that too.
I'm going to let Doug just talk about the estimates. The removal of modular classrooms, there's 17 of them, so right now it's a rough estimate, about $10,000 each one. You're going to see it was a lower amount, we were going to take them all off, but there could be infrastructure that we have to keep there because we're keeping some there. It could be the roofs that are overhangs and things like that we have to keep there. So that is another estimate. So that's a conservative estimate, I would say. Renovation of North High School, I believe this is based on a square footage amount of renovations, and until we know the specific scope, we believe that is a estimate that can be used for today. And minimal renovations of LSAC, that is something that we're not sure of what will need to be happening, but we wanted to put a number in there because we didn't want to ignore that there could be renovations that we could be responsible for as we leave space and recondition other space. So in total, this would be something that we would ask you to spend out of the capital reserve fund or the bond fund, depending on where the funds are, but it'd be one-time capital cost. It would not be something that I'd suggest come out of the general fund.
These are upper limit costs too. I mean, we've seen, although we keep struggling sometimes, where there are people interested in taking some of these modular units from us. So at $170,000, we'd be assuming that we're demolishing everything. There might be the potential that someone would want one of those. We'd be happy to move it into your backyard if you want. But as of right now, this would be an upper limit for those costs, and these would be, I think, upper limits for these costs, although until we go out to bid to look at some of these renovations, it's hard to say.
So I just want to be clear, since the Network Operations Center is going to move because we're going to vacate LSEC at some point. So that renovation cost would happen regardless, whatever, I mean, even if we moved it someplace else, there is a cost to moving it. So this is just, it just happens to be there, correct?
That's correct.
And also, so how much money did it cost us, do you know, when we moved into LSAC originally, to put the Network Operations Center there?
I don't know what the costs were for the renovations to the office space area, but the data center itself was already there. The LSAC had actually vacated a fully functioning data center. So the costs were, I needed some help with some consultants to help move some of the equipment, but we pretty much loaded everything in my van and drove it over from the basement to Chancellor. So there were no real additional costs to that because it was already there.
That's why when we moved in there, when we saw that space, we walked through and it was like a bunch of kids in Christmas time. You know, we found a space that looked great for the kids. It had a cafeteria, so the kids for Sloan really got a real place. They had been in a garage, they had been in a little house, they had been in lots of spaces that weren't appropriate for them. And what made it all better was this room with these holes in the floor covered with flooring that was the technology center. So it was absolutely in each area perfect for us at the time. And the lease at the time when we took it seemed reasonable. But today, not so much. And the space is still perfect in many ways. And could we just stay there? I guess we could, but we really shouldn't.
Well, it sounds like they don't want us to.
Well, we could, but we really shouldn't. And maybe if good work is done, an even more appropriate place will be found for the kids, a place where they can interact more with community and have places where they could walk to a job. That not the Sloan children so much, but the Achievement Program. So, I mean, I want us to do good for them, and we'll just have to wait it out.
So just out of curiosity, and I want to get out as well, but when this lease is up, is it that they want us out and won't renew, or do we have a right to renew?
We have a right to a 10-year renewal for the entire lease.
Will it be at the same cost or be it something higher?
It's actually locks at the initial cost, and then you go up in the escalation. I'd have to ask Mr. Cox to do a better look at that lease, but I think right now that 10-year cost locks at that point, and then there's an escalation of 25 cents.
I think there has something to do with market value, current market value or something in surrounding areas in that renegotiation.
I've just got to say, we've enjoyed a great relationship with these folks, and they've been nothing but helpful every time we've tried to work with them. The escalation of the lease got a little bit further than what we thought 10 years ago, but at the same time, when we've tried to work with them, they've been very helpful with us. Do they want the whole property back? I don't know that right now, but I think they want to move into the back part of that, and they want to stop. They're a growth industry. There's more people taking the law school admissions tests now than there were 10 years ago, and what they thought was adequate space, which happens sometimes, isn't anymore. So they're moving, and they've got another tenant in there, which is ATS, who is also looking to add a little bit of space, I believe.
Our costs are not just the rent that we pay. We also promise to put in air conditioning when the air conditioning goes down, and other kinds of things, and so it's been on, they like us, they should like us. We've been really good tenant.
I have a question about the 1.5, similar to Mrs. Brooks. Is that an estimate of costs that would completely and wholly move the center? It would be fully functional, operational? You know, it's not like a temporary modification because we have space in the high school and that's what we're spending that money on, and if we would do it with the thought that it might move somewhere else. Like, it would be the thought would be it'd be a permanent space, that's where our center would be, and that would be the cost to make that our permanent center.
That's correct. That's the
Okay.
total estimated project cost to
Permanently place it.
relocate it to that
Okay.
location.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
I'm also just curious, this is possible because there are empty seats at North, and by my calculation, well, I believe it's like 500 empty seats. In moving the knock over to North, how many seats is that taking up? What does that change the deficit to?
It's hard to say because not every space translates to seats. You know, you're talking about relatively large spaces that are part of the technology education program. Would you venture an estimate at that?
Yeah, those are all elective courses that are in there. One of those rooms is used, I think, 1 or 2 periods a day. The other one is used different times in each of the semesters, but all of them can easily be shifted to other areas that are still part of the tech ed program. They've lost, I think, 2 staff members over the last couple of years, and certainly with a slight decline in their enrollment, they don't need all the space that they currently have in that area. So that's why that area was looked at.
Plus, it's adjacent to an entrance, and it's easy access in and out for our staff.
I think the question,
Well, I'm just curious, I mean, I'm trying to understand how does that change the capacity of that building?
yeah, is there more
If you don't
capacity?
have the answer now, that's fine, but I'm curious to know that, because I think that we take a lot of criticism for inefficient spaces, and you know, obviously this is being done because there is so much room at North. I'm just curious to know, as a percentage or whatever, how does this change the capacity at school?
It'd be an easier percentage for you, Mrs. Brooks, than an actual number of seats taken from an elective course. But what we could talk about the percent of space that's actually taken in that area. That might be an easier way of representing.
Because, I'm sorry, the other thing I would add is there were 2 large areas that are potential for the relocation of where we would locate the knock. So we don't necessarily take both of those large spaces as a part of this project.
Let me pose that question to Mrs. McCarthy and get back to you, okay? She might have a
I
better
don't need the
sense.
answer now, I'm just, I mean.
Yeah, it would be the number of kids scheduled in there over that 6-7 period day that we're doing right now, so we could get that to you.
Can we go back to the illustration you had for the LSAC building?
Sure.
With the law school, Mrs. Council taking over the part of the school. Is there any part, I guess it would be outside, where you're going to have the adults from LSAC potentially in contact with the children from the
No.
schools?
That's been very clear in our lease, and they've been very good about that when they take over space, they partition it. So when the original law school admissions building was handed over to us, this was one large space with access across. We and law school admissions collaborated on creating these barriers so that the folks that are on this side enter and go in this way or go into an entrance. I think they actually created a new entrance over here for the people to come in. So there's 2 different integrated uses, one here and one there, I think. There is no opportunity for a spillover of our kids versus the adults that are on the other side. We made sure of that.
Now, how about outside the building? You'd say the
No,
same
because there's their parking lot, and that's how they enter. Here's where we go, and here's where our buses come in, and that's how we enter.
Has there ever been an occasion or an incident with the contact of an adult with a child at the LSAC?
The only time is that the parking lot where the main entrance to the Sloan School is, there is some use of that when the ETS people came in. But if our kids are there, our adults are there at the same time. And otherwise, it's partitioned off and locked. There's a locked door no one can get through. There's never been an incident.
But this is proposed to be a more intense use by not our personnel or our kids. Is that right?
There would be, yes, as you gather more use for the other use, there'd be more people there. But there still is a segregation. It's a very large site, and there's plenty of parking on these sides that would accommodate this. Plus, these entrances are all locked entrances that are key code access only, same as the main entrance here too. So there's no way to get into this area without either a key fob access or being buzzed into the building, through the main lobby.
So I just always have a concern when we have adults around children who aren't screened. Would it be unreasonable to ask that if we have employees of LSAC, or I guess ETS, if the employees are going through a screening process, they're going to be there?
I wouldn't ask them to do that. I don't think there is, the segregation is too complete to make them go through the expense of going through that process.
There's never been a time, to my knowledge, that any of our kids have been in any physical contact with the adults. I was just pointing out that they do see them out there in that parking lot when they're in the cafeteria area, but there's no actual contact between them.
That raises an issue in my mind, Mr. Frederickson. With regard to the knock, are there ever non-employees going in on an emergency basis?
We have contractors come into the data center periodically
They all
throughout
have
the year.
the child abuse and criminal history?
They all have the clearances, or if they don't, if it's a one-time they're coming in, they're escorted with an adult at all times.
Okay, because if you move it to north, I know you have the partition there, I guess, but you're not going to have that at north.
At north, there'll be a separate entrance in the parking lot,
Oh, really?
and a separate entrance on the outside.
That's the purpose of doing the network operations center here, not the offices, but there's a separate entrance that would get you into this space without having to come through the school itself.
So you'll use the west entrance, I guess?
Right, yeah, the one that comes, I think that there's that chiller in that area there.
Actually, we, in our preliminary design, we're actually going to put a door in just for the data center, so we're not even walking through the school to get in and out.
Thanks.
We're talking about other topics now, too?
Just very quickly, let me go through the last one. There's just this last strand that you asked me about. Eastburn and Gray has been in conversation with a person who might be interested in the Twining Ford facility. It would be a stretch for us right now without another place to move our operations out of Twining Ford. But we could certainly look to do that over a period of time if we actually were doing a middle school renovation and looking to vacate a Richboro Middle School. Until that time, I think it would be very hard to do that. That said, you could certainly look at a buy and then lease back process if the people were willing to take some time and probably would need to figure out how to develop that property. But as of right now, the uses at Twining Ford are very specific and very necessary for the school district. There's a wood shop there, there's an electrical shop there, there's a welding place. All of those things are necessary to keep 15 school facilities, 16 with LSAC, in shape and a good place. It's a storage place for us. It gives us office space for our maintenance mechanics to be able to access email, which they don't have any other opportunity to. And we are contractually obligated to have a space for Aramark where they can actually have a facility and some storage too. So it's not that that place couldn't be relocated and we could begin to look for places there, but it would be difficult to do that for the 15-16 year over the course of the next year. We'd have to be exploring those spaces and where else we could do. Okay.
I had a question about the suggestion of the K-4 repurposing of Wrightstown. I personally don't think that's actually a very good solution because I'm concerned about the difficulty a fourth grade student would have moving into a brand new school in fifth grade and what that transition would be. I also think it's a little awkward to keep those Wrightstown kids together in a classroom because I don't know, that just feels awkward. I'm really curious to hear what the Wrightstown community would think about that. In my review of the numbers, I think a more plausible and efficient use would be to create a scenario like we had between Chancellor Center and Goodnow Elementary, meaning that Wrightstown becomes a K-1 school for the joint populations of Wrightstown and Newtown, and then Newtown becomes the 2 to 6 school. In that way, the entire population of students is fully integrated for a K-6 experience. So I think that works better. But more to the point, in a K-4 configuration, you would put 221 students in that school, and you said that's a 90% capacity. And this is actually a perfect example of why I struggle with the Schrader methodology. Because when Schrader calculated capacity, it was calculated by how the building was currently being used. So if there were inefficient uses of the buildings, they were never addressed, they were never calculated into potential use if you were to use those rooms efficiently. So basically, every Schrader calculation is lowballing how many students can fit in that room because it doesn't take into account when, for example, when small group things are happening in large classrooms. And we know that those inefficiencies exist because we have buildings. Holland Elementary has no small spaces. Churchville Elementary has one small room. Maureen Welch has 2 small rooms. So we know small group instruction happens, therefore it's happening in large rooms. But specific to this, in a K-4 model where you said that there would be 221 students with a 90% capacity, if we did what I suggested and made it a K-1 school, K-1 and 2 to 6 in Goodnoe, the K-1 configuration would have over 30 more students. It would have 252 students in 2 fewer classrooms. You would be using 9 classrooms in a K-4 configuration, but to my calculation, you would be using 7 classrooms in a K-1. You're putting more students in fewer rooms. And I would argue with that extra space, you don't need to keep the 2 trailers outside on Ricetown. Maybe you can move the storage inside.
I'd be happy to look at that. I know right now there are 2 first grade and 2 first grades at Wrightstown and 5 at Newtown. So that
right. When I did, I realized it could change.
Right.
But with the numbers that I calculated, this year it would be 2 less sections. Maybe next year it would be 1. But the point is, it is still more students in less space in that building.
Okay.
And if anything came out of the capital planning exercises, for me, one of the most valuable things, there were a lot of valuable things, but one really important one was the exercise that Tim Downs went through, which showed, we always talk about the cost of educating students, but we've always looked at it in terms of the entire district. This broke it down onto a building level, and to see the variables between the cost per student that happens, that underscored the enormous inefficiencies that we have. And this is our opportunity to address it. And it's frustrating for me because we've been talking about these things, and none of the presentations that we've got has ever talked about how to use spaces efficiently. I think that should come in too. The other thing is, are you suggesting that there's no redistricting with the trailers? Because I had expected to...
That's exactly what I'm suggesting.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Have you guys thought about what, to Denise's point, about what the capacity of each building would be post this?
We've looked at it in terms of capacity and in terms of space utilization. That's why we had the principals take a look at these spaces and to see where do these various functions fit within the building. And I will admit, Wrightstown has 2 spaces that would actually be underutilized. You'd have a guidance and an IST process in one classroom. You'd have to split that space, and you would have instrumental music in another classroom. But the rest of the spaces in that building are appropriate for the rooms that the principal put them in. That would be what I would suggest would be a 90% configuration in that building. The rest of those buildings, like Hillcrest, Richboro, we've done very good in terms of trying to figure out how to put spaces and kids together.
Right. So I think it's great that you got the building principals involved because they know their spaces. And I think it's great that we're able to get all the trailers off. I think it's just a big win to start with. one question I had, because I didn't see any redistricting, and I didn't, and there might be some of the programming moves. What have we done with excess capacity at Holland and Goodnow, or does that still exist?
So at Goodnow, we haven't done anything with it right now. At Holland, we were moving 3 classroom spaces to Holland that would actually eat up a lot of the space that's now available at Holland, along with some ancillary spaces that they would have that will allow for that. And I explained that in the paper that I gave to the board. So if the board is interested in moving forward, we have some groundwork to do, starting with the Wrightstown community, to talk about the ideas that Mrs. Brooks placed out, as well as the proposal we would have. I think it's a reasonable conversation to have with that community about how that would look, and we would want to do some front-end work before we started to move some programs.
Right, because I'll stand by the statement I made last week that a redistricting, removal of trailers, and identification of capacity in the buildings will tell us if we need to consolidate schools. And it sounds like that is not off the table yet.
No, I mean, we could have redistricted 4 different schools. We did it in a different way.
Yep.
We did it in a way that made, frankly, more sense and less disruption to be able to use space and bring space down.
And I appreciate, in particular, the minimal disruption, because you have to weigh, obviously, the financial benefits with the change to the community. And if it's not a lot of financial win, why would you put everybody through that? I get that. So,
But just to be clear, and maybe I'm confused, you're talking about moving programming. Somebody who goes to Richboro Elementary today will go to Holland tomorrow.
That's correct.
So somebody is changing schools. I think we're getting caught a little in semantics. I mean, if you're bringing kids out of trailers into Richboro Elementary, you're moving a program, whatever kids are in that program are going to a new facility. That's the only way this works, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So you're moving some kids, a program, but Holland is so underused right now. We build it to use it. Goodnow has 8 brand new unused classrooms. When we built that school, I took a lot of heat at facilities for saying, build it big. If you're going to make a mess, you're going to dig up the dirt, build it out. Now we've built it, but we're not going to use it. And, you know, Mr. Klein, in your presentation last week, you talked about keeping those classrooms available for a particular development's children. In looking at the information about that particular development, we find the builders went before the hearing boards and said they anticipated 18 children, not 79 children, 18 children. We're going to keep 8 classrooms cleared for 18 children. It doesn't make sense to me.
But I don't agree that there's 8 classrooms available. The model that you see for Goodnow has an autistic support program and a learning support program occupying the majority of those classrooms. And I didn't come up with that number. The number that I used was the number that came as a result of the most recent look projections from the Decision Insight program that takes those.
So Decision Insight had the wrong numbers in it when you compared yourself for the program last week. It now has additional information that you're using to make your conclusions that is incorrect. You ask, why don't I trust you? This is not about that. This is about the numbers. And the numbers don't say what you're telling us.
Can I help you with, I mean, you might disagree with me, but here's what I told you last time. Decision Insight may or may not be particularly on the money, and we're waiting for the most recent updates on that. But when we did the work last week and we added up the numbers from each of the school facilities based on the Decision Insight maps, they were within 2 kids of the number of kids we have right now. So whether there was 100 off here or there, that has nothing to do with what they're doing. They're taking the projections based on the units. Those are 57 townhouses coming up. And whatever the developer says in terms of his projections of 18, reasonable people can disagree with that based on what townhouses bring.
They're $500,000 townhouses for people. They're huge, but they're not family homes. And so the projection they made to the community, the projections that they made to the community when they applied for their permits are not what Decision Insight says. So I don't know what to make of that.
So here's what, all I would say to you is, and I've said this to you a couple different times, we need to bring Goodnoe Elementary School online. We need to look at where the programs go after all the renovations are done before we make any ascertaining of whether there's available space there or not. When we put the students with autistic support in there. And in Holland's situation, yes, there's still 1 or 2 classroom spaces that would not be utilized based on the program changes that we're doing. But that's it. Across the rest of the school district, we've put every kid in every space, and we've allowed those schools to come to capacity in all of their places. So if you have a little bit at Goodnoe and you have a little bit at Holland, that's not unreasonable based on the ability to move kids around. If you want me to right-size Holland and move some kids from Hillcrest, we can certainly do that. But I don't know if it's worth the disruption to fill those last 2 classrooms. That's just my opinion.
I just want some clarification. I don't know the answer. I don't know if it's right to disrupt either. But the criticism that the district gets for making multi-million-dollar renovations and not filling it with students, to me, is a sound criticism and weighs heavily on me for future decisions that I need to make for renovations. But I'm just trying to understand, if I heard this right, I believe there's roughly 200 empty seats at Holland, and you're suggesting that moving the...
I'm not looking at it as seats. First of all, they're kids.
Second
of all, I'm putting...
I resent that you're trying to suggest that I don't...
But I am, because
but I'm just,
you can use
there
the
is space for, I just want to understand that according to the Schrader report, which I don't even accept, but I think it is completely minimalizing it, but the Schrader report shows that 200 more students can fit in that school. You're talking about moving 3 classrooms over, and you're saying that only 2 would be left. I look at this in terms of how are the tax dollars giving back to what we've put in. And I'm just trying to understand. You're saying that there may be 2 empty classrooms, but the math doesn't add up to me when there's only 3 things being moved over there, and according to Schrader, at a very minimum, there's room for 200 students.
I gave you the model. I showed you exactly where all the classroom spaces would be. I showed you how we filled those classroom spaces. We wouldn't fill them with 30 kids. We would fill them with less than that. And in both Goodnoe and Holland, you have programs that accept kids into a large group space because they need that space. Same also with Newtown Elementary with the multi-handicap class. So that's the problem with just looking at it in terms of children in seats. There are some programs that demand a large space and there's a smaller group in there. That's true of Goodnoe. That's true of Richboro right now. That's true of Newtown. It's just true of the way that we have to work with those students in those class spaces.
Nobody's asking to not do the best we can do and to do the right things.
Good.
And meet our IEPs for special education children. To suggest that we think of our children any less than you do is really wrong. Is really wrong on your part. And beyond that, we are asking you to care for these buildings and use them in a way that is efficient. And they're not efficiently used right now, and I believe you know that. And I don't understand the resistance, the strong resistance to using, you have some buildings you claim are overutilized. So we have kids in classes with 20 in one place and 33 in another. Is that a fair education? Is that an appropriate use? Do we care less about some children and more about others? That's what's happening. Keeping more spaces than we need, paying for those spaces, prevents us from being able to do the right thing by all the children. We have home and school associations that are still out there, 7 cupcakes to buy basic needs. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. We should, because of the way this community already supports education, be able to support the technology needs of young learners today. And we can't. And we don't. It's ridiculous.
Under this model, Mrs. Sexton, I really want to keep going. How do you save money by redistricting? Other than the potential that
You try to start by saying that if you use the space in the total district, the whole of it, of the school, but the 10 or 20 million dollars that we're gonna spend in 2 years to renovate it if you try to keep it open.
Okay.
And so,
Sorry, you done, Patty?
done.
No, I was going to say, so you showed us an example last week that created a tremendous amount of change. And you showed us a model that got the trailers off today and really minimalized it. And there's still some questions about capacity out there. I think where the logical next step, or it feels like the next step, is kind of around putting that together over time and starting to make some changes now with plans to make more significant changes over time. I think if we've got capacity in the district and we admit that, at some point we've got to have some kind of redistricting. But to do it in a thoughtful way with plenty of lead time and plenty of input makes a lot of sense rather than to rush to it. I think that, you know, until we see what the full existing footprint of buildings looks like at a 90% capacity, 92%, whatever it is to account for the differences in, you know, building questions or whatever it is, it's going to be hard to make a decision. So what I would love to see is the work that you did last week and the work that you did this week put together with the Newtown Middle School plan, which shows how we can immediately impact next year with trailers off, moves to the LSAC, consider redistricting over the next 2 to 3 years and potentially consolidating buildings, overlay the middle school plan and show us the financials. I mean, this is all very, very consistent with what a lot of the groups came back with, a lot of their commonalities, and it's going to make sure that, or get everybody comfortable with the fact that we're utilizing the capacity, and to put it all together in one plan that we can look at every year and make adjustments as there's changes to enrollment or any other things that we might have not thought of now, I think would be a good thing. So I think we've got a lot of elements flying around, and we've got a lot of energy pointed at one particular, but if you could bring these things together around what it would look like over time, I think that'd be really helpful, at least for me, in trying to support a plan.
I will give you anything you want.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, no, and I know that.
Last week's presentation and this week's presentation are not symmetrical. There's not the opportunity to bring the two of them together. You're either going to take off an elementary school and do a massive redistricting, or you're going to start to take off modulars. There's probably the opportunity to take off modulars with significant redistricting too. We chose to show you a model that's a little bit different. That could be year one, and then we can build forward off of that.
That's exactly what I was saying. I'm not saying one or the other. I'm saying you've got a really good start here that does a lot of really good things, but then we've got to build on that in the near future in a reasonable amount of time to get to the other stuff.
Here for you to give me feedback on. I tried to get this to you ahead of time so you had an opportunity to give me feedback. I did get some good questions and opportunities to look at this. We can take off more than, we can take off take off another modular. We can try to balance things out. It is our first chance to take a look at this, consistent with what the teams did, and say, here's the plan forward to take off modulars and council.
Yeah, and I think, and again, I think it was great work. I think it's a great start, and it's what's most reasonable to do in the limited amount of time before we have next school year, quite frankly, and to give the community a chance to understand and comment on more significant change that could potentially have to come to more fully utilize our building. So I think it's a great start. I think this is a good conversation, and I think as we pull together this information in the next few weeks, we can have something that, again, addresses all these individual things, pulls them in a plan over 5 years, and gets us where we need to be.
You know, for me, a lot of what Mr. Klein talked about tonight, and I was happy to get the information 2 days ago instead of on the day of the board meeting. That certainly was a big improvement, to have it on Tuesday instead of on Thursday. But it's basic housekeeping. Every change that we're talking about in terms of bringing trailers in are things that could reasonably have been done last year without too much trouble. Basic housekeeping. To store stuff in spaces like trailers is just, it's wasteful. It's so wasteful of the resources that we have. We are down 1,600 kids. That's a lot of children. And we knew 2 years ago that we needed to do something. Then last year we did the study. And this year is now, and it's time for a decision on some things. And then if we're going to say that we need to wait, this is a good start, it's a baby step, I don't believe at any time that any community will be happy to have their school closed. I don't believe at any time that people are going to say, yeah, let's redistrict. These are hard things. They're disruptive to the community. They're not a happy thing. Nobody says that they are. They're a necessary change in the growth of a district, and it's happening everywhere. We went, Denise and I, to the IU had yet another meeting about the basic education funding formula, and every person there talked about the same situation that we're in. A decrease in children, the need to change how we do business, because a train wreck is coming at us. And our approach to that train wreck has been great. I think that the plans that Mr. Reinhardt has for us have helped us find our way through it. We heard ourselves say, we have some savings in that fund balance. That's helped us get through. But the fact is, we owe it to our community to be as efficient in the running of these schools as we can. And that means running classrooms with 20 children is not something in our future. If we want to give an equal and equitable opportunity for all of our children. And that means redistricting to fill classrooms, not to 30 kids, not even to 28 kids, but to some higher level that uses the classrooms and the teachers efficiently. Why are we waiting? We knew a year, we studied a year, we're talking a year. Now, are we too close to do anything next September? We're 10 months away. I think you could move a whole marching army from here to Europe in 10 months, maybe 6. I'm not talking about doing that. Something much simpler. And I think we should do it. And I think if we don't do it, we are letting our children down. That's how I feel about it. So, I don't have to talk about it anymore, but you're going to be paying this price over time if you don't act. I don't believe at any point school administrators are going to say, give teachers more children to teach. I don't believe at any point they're going to say, we want to close a school. Not here in Council Rock. So, it's what needs to be done. You don't want to do it? Okay.
Patty, I hear a whole bunch of criticism, so what I'm not hearing is, what's your solution? Let me say one other thing. You mentioned a train wreck, just so the community knows. I believe you're talking about the contributions to the PSERS fund.
Yeah, we have an Act 1 limit.
I just want to make sure that...
a train wreck coming. It's not a train that's going to knock a building down.
Okay. All right, so given all your criticisms, your tone of voice tonight, tell me, where would you want us to head?
I want you to close the school.
Tonight?
November 6th.
All right, you want us to close which school?
Wrightstown.
November 6th. And
Not close it November 6th for September.
Right, for the next school year, and
Right.
redistrict at the same time.
Start, move children.
And get rid of all the trailers?
I actually believe you can do it all, but
Okay, so get rid of the trailers, close Wrightstown Elementary, and redistrict, all by the next school year.
and you don't think that's possible?
Right now, we have a lot of information and models in front of us, and I'm still pouring through them.
And that's the part that I find, all I keep saying is, we're down 1,500 kids, 1,600 kids. Explain to me why we could have 1,600 more kids in this school district 8 years ago, and we're full today, as we said. How can that be?
I don't think anybody's disagreeing with your point or what needs to be done. I can only speak for myself here. I think it's how we do it to where we can recoup the greatest cost efficiencies with some respect for the change within the community. If for me, I don't disagree with where you're going, but can we close the school next year? I don't believe so. Should we take the trailers off, and do we need to redistrict, and could we close a school in the next few, 2 years, maybe if the numbers bear it out, but what's the savings of doing it so
The thing
quickly
is,
versus not causing that change.
if we could keep Wrightstown open, if it was a viable school for growth, that would be sort of a different story to me. But we have solidly built, renovated buildings now that if we needed growth, there's space in them. To put people all through this, send them home, bring them back next September, maybe you'll have a different board by next November, have them start all over again with it. It just seems insane to me. It seems appropriate. You know, it's never going to be a right time. It will never be the right time. And it takes up, that's just, I'm a teacher. I don't want to hurt education or the education of any child, and I don't believe I am.
I think some of where I have greater pause is we have, and I'm not suggesting that you're not, but we do have to take into account the level of what the community can tolerate at one time with contracts and negotiations ahead of us and other change and other day-to-day and PSERs to close a school, to close potentially 2 schools, to consider a renovation of another school, to completely redistrict and remove trailers, seems like a great deal to me for the community to bear. Now, maybe there's a theory of you rip the Band-Aid one time and you get over it and you move forward. Seems like an awful lot at once.
I would say even over a 2-year period, if you're ripping a Band-Aid, but potentially it's the right thing to do. You can't just do one in a vacuum. We've got to see what the whole picture looks like. I mean, we've been talking about potentially closing an elementary school, but the reality is there's a lot of discussion around the same thing in the middle school.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I would not say that we're ready to close a middle school because we have a lot of building and renovation, if we are going to go through with it, to do. So no, we can't
Right,
close
so
a
how
middle
can we
school right
possibly
now.
make a call on something else without seeing a picture and having a plan? And that's all I'm trying to drive this discussion to, is from individual elements and shooting from the hip and to bringing this all together into one plan where we understand, at least directionally, you know, what the financial implications are for taxpayers and the impact to communities and above all, the academic and performance safety of kids, what it looks like. And then we can make a decision, have a plan, and start to execute that plan.
I had a few comments. Is that okay?
Dr. Foster.
Thank you. So I would love to hear what the Newtown and Wrightstown communities think about the K-1 idea. It would take some, because it would affect both Newtown elementary school parents and Wrightstown. So you know, it was a new concept. It would use the space more efficiently. Is it something that we can do or not? It would be great to hear everyone's thoughts on that. And then on the presentation tonight from Mr. Klein, I liked it. There was a lot more detail, specific diagrams and uses of spaces. So it's the kind of thing we need to make decisions. So I really appreciated it. And when we're thinking about space, you know, we've heard about Holland, $18 million, but we're, you know, 1/3 of it we're not using. And that's why it's so important to get down to the nitty-gritty of the space. So many people have said capacity. All you have to do is understand what your capacity is. Well, it turns out that it's not that simple to understand because it gets into the programming of the schools. And there's different kinds of special education. There's small group instruction needs. There's regular ed. There's a lot of pieces to it. But we all know at the end of the day, it comes down to children in rooms at specific times. So when Mr. Desko talked about the high school and said, well, there's a couple of rooms that for a couple of periods a day are used, that's a kind of an example of an inefficiency. But, you know, for me to understand, and it may be like Andy says, it's something that we have to do over a period of time. We're going to have to lay down spreadsheets of our key assets. When you spend $18 million for assets, those are really big assets. So our rooms are some of our key assets that we use to educate children. We're going to have to say, this school has these rooms, and first period, this is how many kids are in them, and this is what they're doing. In second period, this is what they're doing, so that we know what's going on in these schools. And because the Schrader report, and it's not really fair to call it the Schrader report. Mr. Schrader did a great job. He was given a vision by the principals of each school. Each principal got to put forth their own vision for the space they had. But the reality is the superintendent of schools and the school board has to put forth a vision for the entirety of all the schools put together. So we need, Mr. Schrader did a great job of taking that input, putting it down in tables, and putting it down graphically. But that's as far as it went. That was the kind of local vision. We need to dig in to the vision for the entire district. So I would love to have more resolution about the uses of these rooms, especially at schools like Goodnow and Holland, where we put in a lot of money, a lot of investment from the community. You know, between the two of them, $36 million worth of investment. We need to understand how that is being used so that we can think clearly. Because right now it's really low resolution data. It's really hard to know how we're using our space. So I don't really want an efficiency study. I want us to understand with our own efforts, the efforts of the administration, how we're using these spaces, and are there constraints that the state places on special education that we have to live with? Because if we don't understand these things, we're not going to make good decisions, and we're not going to know whether we're over or under capacity. So I would love to know more about that. If I could get more support on the board, that would be great for that. And that's it.
I see a breakdown of the process, and it's unfortunate. The administration is definitely going to have a bias. It's a human nature. It's hard to work around it. It's something we struggle with all the time, and I'm disappointed when I hear, Miss Brooks spends an awful lot of time on this material, and I look to her for information from time to time, and she spent so much time with. Where should I begin? Miss Brooks spends a tremendous amount of time with this material. She spent years and years as a resident advocate for different programs in this school, and for her to make a statement, 200 seats, and for Equip to come back, we're talking about kids, not seats. I don't think you meant it disrespectfully, but it certainly comes off that way, and I think it's unfortunate.
It was not disrespectful, and if it was taken that way, I apologize.
So I think I would like to see an efficiency study, and with no disrespect to the administration, I think it should be done from an outside group. I'm okay with spending the money for that. I'm okay with it if it's a delay of time. Frankly, I think that we should move this self-imposed deadline from November 6th to later in the month, November 20th, if that's not Thanksgiving. I don't want to be here on Thanksgiving. But I think we're putting way too much pressure on ourselves to make a quick decision when we've missed a couple key meetings. But I would like to get a feel from the rest of the board about an outside agency conducting an efficiency study that's driven by the board, with the idea that this isn't an architect that's going to perform work in this district. We're not going to hire them for any work, and there's no potential conflict here. We just want to make sure that every space is utilized efficiently, and that we have some good hard numbers to work with, and try to take away some of this conflict between board members and the administration.
The reason why I said I didn't want that kind of approach, efficiency study, is you hire someone like an architect to come in, and the reality is, it's nitty-gritty of programming, like occupational therapy. So suddenly the administration is spending hours and hours explaining, well, this program is this way for a reason, and that's why, so I would rather, it's a huge opportunity for us, for the administration, to educate us and the community about our programming and what spaces schools need. So instead of sending that to somebody else, I would rather us understand our schools better. And you know, if you lay it all out and there's a room that has 2 children in it for half of the day, it's going to show up, and we're going to ask questions. If all the kids don't add up to the number of kids in the school, you know, when you start writing numbers down and looking at them, you begin to see things. That's fine.
I agree, I hear you, but there's clearly a trust issue with some board members and the administration, so if we have...
But we can work through it. I mean, instead of running away from it, let's work through it.
I don't want to
Let's work together.
I'm not suggesting we run away from it, I'm suggesting we deal with it, and we deal with it within the timeline that we have, because I don't think we can work through it in the timeline that we have.
So, I just want to comment on that.
Go ahead.
So, 2.5 years ago, whatever it was, when we said, this looks like I don't want to say, there were certain board members who supported, Mr. Klein offered to do the analysis, whatever, we said, no, we don't want that. And we went out and we hired Schrader. And then we said, okay, now we have Schrader, we don't know if that's right, and we don't still want the administration to do it, so we're going to form a committee of the public, and we're going to let them work for a year. And then they're going to come back with 3 different options for us. So frankly, for me, we can wait till 2020 if we want. We can ask for 10 more studies. And I know that you were, but it's a little frustrating because I've been in conversations about this. For me, if I have to choose, here's Committee A, Committee B, and Committee C as president. I already said, I like Committee 1's presentation. I thought it was good. I'd buy in. They did the work. They looked at the classrooms. They looked at the students. I didn't. True. That's true. I'm believing the year of work they spent. Now, things change. I'll just finish and I'll give it right to you, Dr. Foster. Things change, and maybe some modifications need to be made to them. And then we said, okay, well, I feel like the direction was, okay, well, some things have changed, so now we're going to say to the administration, Wrightstown's closed, and one of the proposals was, Proposal 2, to close it next year. Do that. Where would you put the kids? And then they did that, and then I feel like we're like, well, that's not the right number of kids, and that's... we could talk about these numbers moving back and forth and for years. I mean, I feel like I've been talking about it for years. And during those years, we got more open space and more open space and more open space. So, frankly, for me, I want to vote. I want to make a decision. I want to say this is the information in front of me, and I'm going to make the best decision I can based on the information. I don't want to rush it if there's some big piece, or frankly, if there's some of you who want to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or I'm good. I would rather everybody felt good about it, but I do not want to wait 2 months. I want to say we've studied this. We've asked the administration to do it in the beginning. We asked the administration to do it at the end. We hired outside consultants. We had community groups do it. I want to look at my choices and say, and frankly, just in the all front, I would much prefer to get trailers offline as my #1 goal. I don't believe that I would vote to close a school and get trailers offline in 1 year. I do believe something similar to Mr. Block said, that I could see a plan, and I really struggle, and Mrs. Sexton, you said it first, of the communities out here now, and if I say it's going to be 2 years to close Wrightstown, and now they're here, it seems.
For 2 years.
Yeah, I do feel that, but by the same token, you know, for me, the middle school thing is a huge thing, and we just gloss over it every time. North has more room than any elementary school. I thought it was a great suggestion. I agree with Mrs. Brooks. We should see if there's more room. Maybe there's other things we could move there. But we're not talking about that. We keep talking about the little things, and at some point, we got to make a decision. We got to bite a bullet. We got to try. We got to make a move. We got to try to save money and use the space more inefficiently. It's frustrating for everybody. It's been a long, tedious process. We need to make the best decision we can, but I do not want to go out and hire more people.
I agree with you completely. We have to take some level of action. The idea of removing most of the trailers, that's a great idea. Nobody's complaining about that. It's exactly what we need to do. It's a
Well, I am
start.
concerned about what programs are moving and how that impacts it, so I'm looking for more information, but in theory, I'm good with it.
It's a great start that should have,
Well, either way.
but it's doing now. It's happening now. I am good with that. I just believe that there is much more that can be done, and I'm sad that we are not doing it.
I mean,
But I'm happy to take the votes and see what happens.
Well, I agree, that's what I mean, we might not agree, but maybe there will be votes to do it. I'm not saying what I want's gonna happen, I'm just saying I feel so much pain of dragging it on too much longer.
I just think it's important to remember that the capital planning committee really didn't dig into programming. That wasn't their charge. So they had to accept the Schrader report kind of like it was. To getting into programming is a ton of work. And I think, unfortunately, at the end of the day, we're going to need to understand it better. And that may be something that takes a while for us. But I think that we've been talking about closing Wrightstown first because it's the hardest part of the discussion. After that, the middle schools are easier, and getting rid of trailers is a pretty easy, that's like sliding down a slide.
I don't know that moving the knock is easy, I don't know about renovating north, I don't know, we've used all the.
I think all of those are going to be.
The items that we have not discussed are probably the ones that we have a majority of support for. That's why it's not getting conversation. But you know, I started going to the capital planning meetings when it started. I wasn't even sworn in on the board at that point. Okay? I went to the capital planning meetings, and I have to confess, I went to those meetings and said, dear God, please let these committees say that no schools should close. Please. I'm on the verge of being sworn into the school board, and all I wanted was these committees to please help me not have to be part of a decision that might close a school. In the course of what I learned through going to their meetings, reading their reports, unfortunately, things became very clear to me. We have 3 unsustainable schools for the long-term view. The way I look at it, with declining enrollment, pressures of the pension, renegotiated contracts, but very specifically the costs of renovating those buildings, we simply cannot afford to do everything that's involved with keeping those buildings open and not affecting the program that the students receive. And in spite of applause in the audience or what was said that I was offended by, and I do appreciate the compliment, anyone who knows me knows nothing is more important to me than keeping the kids front and center of every single decision. So knowing that 3 schools, in my opinion, are unsustainable for the long term, I believe we have to do the work to determine when can we take them offline. It would be better because we know, I believe the future does not have those schools. I don't know what the timeline is, but I believe the 3 schools that were identified in the capital planning committees will not be here 20 years from now. They won't. And because we know that's coming, I need to be very sure that if I'm voting not to close that school today or to close a school today, that I have faith in the numbers, which I don't have. But in my view of the numbers, I believe it is possible to close Wrightstown, do that redistricting. I believe there's space. If there's not, I want the numbers to support it that are not in conflict with the numbers that I have. Perhaps the solution is that we move forward with the removal of the trailers, which I think everybody will agree with. Because it doesn't move any students, I don't know how we get there. We need an efficiency study, whether we hire a firm, figure out a way to do it internally, get an efficiency study done over the course of next year, and then we will know, going forward, what the future of the buildings are. But I don't want to hold up taking off the trailers, something that I myself have lobbied for, wished for as long as I can remember. That's great, and because it doesn't involve redistricting, it isn't painful to the community in any way. Yes, a few of the programs are being moved, but to the
broad population of those schools, they are unaffected. So let's get the efficiency study done so that we can understand, and it would certainly help me to reconcile the non-sustainability of some of these buildings and what the future might look like.
Going back to my comments on the efficiency study, so yeah, there has to be an organization out there that recognizes or is knowledgeable about educational capacities and programs. There has to be. This has to be done in other. We see it in school districts right around us. It's done in the.
That's how we got Schrader. That's what they were recognized for.
Great. Well, maybe we go back. I don't know.
Well, or maybe there's another firm. There were two of them.
Here's the thing. We have information now that we didn't have before. We have the Grupp-Schottmiller proposal of 5th and 6th grade centers. I'd like to look at that. We really haven't looked at that. We haven't talked about it in depth. We certainly haven't had our administration look at it. So we have new information. I understand it's painful. This is a big decision, and I don't think that we should move any more quickly than we have to.
And also, I just want to clarify, the Schrader study was not an efficiency study. The Schrader study was simply a capacity study based on what was going on in the buildings in 2012.
I hear agreement. I hear there's stuff that we can move forward on this year, meaning 15, 16. I hear an appetite to explore how we better utilize capacity in our buildings. Personally, I believe we are an oversight board. We pay our administration a lot of money to do the great work that they do. They, including the principals, know their buildings, they know their communities, and I think they're well positioned to come up with the recommendations that we have, and it's our job to create the guidelines and to push them harder as we have when we believe that there's opportunities. But I'm hearing agreement to move forward on the quick wins in a year and then task the administration with, again, laying out a 5-year plan that says we'll tackle these things on this time frame.
I agree.
And
There's a lot of
execute
agreement.
there. I mean, I don't think we need to bring anybody outside to do that. I think, you know, we've got everything we need here.
Well, at this point, we have another meeting next week, and do other people want to comment further on the presentation or anything? I don't
You know,
want
one thing I've been wondering about, because we talk about these numbers, and I don't know whether any board members would have an appetite to present examples, on the big screen as to where things break down for them and why they have such an interest in efficiency studies or understanding the programming or whatever. So that's just an idea I wanted to put out there. If any board members at the next meeting want to say, hey, here's why, instead of doing it in words, they could show it in diagrams or tables or whatever. Give them 3 minutes. That's what the public gets. Just people can think about it.
Okay. So we have another meeting next week for the public. We had some significant sound issues at the last meeting, so I'd like to ask the board if they would be open to having the meeting here to start with.
Do we know that the same problems would exist there?
No, we don't know, but we don't know they wouldn't.
The other
What's
thing
your
I would say is
recommendation, Matt?
As much as I'd love to do it at Newtown Middle, I think it's better to be safe than sorry, especially given everything that you're talking about.
it's a tremendous amount of time for our team to set those up. It was 4 people almost the entire day to set that facility up, check it, and it still didn't particularly work well.
The sound was working perfectly fine an hour before we started the board meeting. All indications indicate that the equipment, there is a fault in the power supply inside the equipment for grounding. It's out for repair. We don't have it back, so we'd be using other equipment, but I can't guarantee that we won't have an issue.
Let's do it here.
Okay.
I
So
think it's more important to know that we can have something that is
that's-
audible at home and postable later.
that's where I was. The second is the board's appetite to send out another communication piece, just reminding people, because that's the last public meeting before the meeting that we vote. Is there appetite or desire to get a communication out?
Yes, but my question is, what are they going to see? So, I'd like to give them some, Patty made the statement a few weeks ago that this impacts everybody. And the reality is we only get
Not so
attendance.
much now.
I'm sorry?
Not so much.
No, it should over time.
Not so much
It should. But the reality is we only get attention and feedback and participation, which we love, when it's impacting certain groups of people. And the reality is, I do agree that over time, to utilize our space efficiently, it's going to impact everybody. So, this is an opportunity to bring people out. Again, kind of consistent with what Dr. Foster said, I would love for the administration to, and I'd be happy to help and stand with Mr. Klein to present it, is take these ideas that we've got, including the trailer piece, the LSAC piece, the potential closing of a school and redistricting in year 2 or 3, the middle school possibilities, putting it all together over the course of 5 years. Maybe Bob can do some modeling, which would give us some broad financials and really gives people something to get their arms around. This is what could happen. This is directionally what should happen. I don't know if you guys buy into that.
Are you talking about in the next couple of weeks, or are you talking about long-term, in
No,
terms of the communication?
I'm talking about taking all of the information we've talked about, trying to put it into a long-term plan, getting it all on one piece of paper to where the public can see what we're talking about, where people from parts of the district that aren't paying attention right now, who could potentially be impacted, get it, and we can get, the right.
I don't think that would be you're not talking about, that would be outlined in the communication, that would be maybe presented next week.
Yeah, that's my point. So come ready to see how
The
this.
communication would say.
This could potentially, impact, we'll be talking about, but we'll be talking about redistricting, and it could impact any.
Well, we've already said it could impact anybody. I'd more likely say that it would say something like the trailers would be taken off at Hillcrest, potentially. Programs would be potentially moved from Richboro to Holland. It would itemize some things that would make communities aware who maybe are not aware that there could be changes. But I'm just asking, different board members have come to me and said that they are receiving criticism about that we need to do additional communication, and I'm just putting it out to the board for what do you want to do?
I think the posting of tonight's presentation, this is the only one that's had any detail for me, so I think that's going to be really helpful. It does not, I would actually like maybe even a little bit more detail for someone who's it references I don't know, like maybe the maps could be blown up a little bigger, I don't know, something, but
Well, we certainly could put that in the communication. Please take a look at this. These are some bullet points that, do we want another piece of communication to go out or not? That's,
Are you talking about an email communication?
well, that's the only way we have currently,
I didn't
other
know
than
you
we
were talking
paid
about
for.
another ad or something like that. You can send out as many emails as you'd like. I just don't want to pay for another ad.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you right now that you don't need to do that. I just got a text from my daughter, and apparently the Newtown patch says, in addition to closing Wrightstown, Patty Sexton said she thinks the administration should be able to redistrict and remove the trailers in time for next year. That's their, where is that one? That is their headline already. So it seems to me that they're doing their job, and it is likely that if people read that, it should annoy them enough.
But that's the
to
problem,
come.
if people read it.
Well, we can't do anything about
Well,
people that do not read and do not look at their email. We can do and if we send them a letter in the mail and it is not in raised lettering with the possibility of money inside the envelope, they're not opening it.
I don't want to make this more complicated. I was asked by some members of the board to get this board to agree to put out an additional piece of communications to highlight some things so that we make sure every piece of the community is aware. Is there any objection?
No.
Okay. I will work with people and we'll see if we can possibly make that happen. In the meantime, the meeting next week will be held here at 7:30. Is that correct, right?
7:30.
Okay, here at 7:30. Please feel free to stay. There'll be public comment at the end of the evening. But we should move on to our agenda unless anyone has anything else they'd like to say or anything to. Okay, so we're going to start with the consent agenda. And can Mr. Bilek, can you read that motion? All right, never mind, sorry. I just look at the end and Jerry wasn't here, so you. Okay.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through G as contained in the attachments to the agenda, subject to order.
Second.
What questions can I or members of our team answer for you?
Roll call, vote, please.
Wait a second.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mr. Abelson? Well, nobody spoke. I don't know what people
You never
want.
get all
I
the
can't
consent
read.
agenda
I
without-
can't read people's minds, guys.
There was one agreement on here. I'm surprised to see it, I guess, under the consent agenda, but It's the McGrath agreement for Christine. Can you just briefly?
I'll start. McGrath is a specific training system for our administrators that talks about progressive discipline. It has, we have used it before, so it's on consent agenda because during Mr. Bollinger's tenure here, he was trained in the McGrath system. He trained all of our administrators. It's a specific system to use for progressive discipline. It's well thought of, it's well researched, and it's held up well in arbitrations. And I asked Ms. Trioli to become trained in that same system because we have a variety of new administrators who would benefit from that training. And when Dave left, we didn't have a trainer of trainers in the system. Christine, anything more?
Right, and it's also going to be beneficial for us to have a consistent approach through our administrative team on how we approach difficult conversations, not only progressive discipline, but how we mentor and coach employees so that they can do better in areas where they may have deficits. I took the foundation course last year at the IU along with a number of my colleagues throughout the county. And the foundation course focused a lot on something called True Speak is their concept, where you're working with employees in a way that is forthright, maintains their integrity, and also allows you to communicate the key pieces that the employee needs to hear so that they can be productive, do better in their job. I'm excited about the training. I think it'll be a great thing for the district. Once I'm trained, then I'm certified for a period of 4 years, and then I'm able to train our administrative team.
Because I thought I saw in the agreement that there could be several licenses to different employees at a cost to us, so if that's the case.
So there's a cost of $120 for me to train each member of our administrative team. We only committed to do 5 per year. That's to keep the cost down. We could do more if we wanted to.
Okay. And this is external to any of our policies or the collective bargaining agreement?
It really is just the approach that you take when you have to have difficult conversations with an employee.
Dr. Foster.
Just because it's on my mind, because here there's a waiver of expulsion hearing agreement. So last year we had some children who were suspended and are now back in school. And I ran into one of the parents of the children, and I was shocked to learn that supposedly, according to state law, that they're required to get jobs. So while they're attending Council Rock right now, in addition to their work, they have to have a job.
Who does?
Well, I don't want to say anybody's name.
No, but I mean, in general,
it was a weapons violation. So supposedly, as part of
It was part of their juvenile adjudication?
Oh.
I guess, but they made it sound like it wasn't necessarily a case-by-case thing. It was a standard part of the juvenile adjudication that is applied. And I just think that I mean, their job is to be a student. I don't get it. And
I know that community service is frequently a part of a juvenile adjudication, so I gather it's the same thing. I don't know offhand.
It wouldn't be something that we would impose.
It's not yet.
No, it's not something we imposed. I thought it was tragic, especially given the nature of the infraction. It was pretty minor.
I know that community service is common.
Right.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Others?
Just use the word suspension, but technically it was expulsion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Bialik?
Yes, with the exception of item E, Treasurer's Report.
Okay. Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mrs. McKessie?
Ms. McKessie stepped out for a minute.
Okay. Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Abramson?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Item number 1, Dr. Foster.
I move to approve the personnel actions and ticket takers and game workers listing as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second? Somebody?
Second.
Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Trioli?
Do we miss Mr. Grepp or what?
We do.
Hearing no objection, I ask the secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. I'm sure he's listening. I'm sure I'll hear about that.
Text me a list of questions,
Thank you, Mr. Bylick.
Well, and Mr. Abramson is already dead to him, I believe I saw.
You may want to explain that.
Best not to.
All right, let's move on, I'm sorry. Item number 3, Mr. Abramson.
I move to award the 2014-2015 maintenance equipment bid number 14-36 to Detland Equipment for the purchase of a portable generator and a post hole digger at a cost not to exceed $3,859, and to Robert E. Little, Inc. for the purchase of 2 rider blowers at a total cost not to exceed $20,770, subject to audit.
Second.
Comments?
Reinhardt, Mr. Taylor, which one would like to talk about post-hole diggers?
I can answer any questions you want. I'm not sure what you want me to say.
Any questions on the postal diggers that we want?
What,
Well, yeah, we need a post-hole digger, and,
what posts are we placing?
well, it is something, an attachment to one of our vehicles, and I can't answer that specifically.
But we do have posts that need placing on
Yes.
a regular basis. Right. Semi. And this isn't one of these that you do by hand. This is
No.
hydraulically driven.
And where will we store it?
In a trailer?
In a trailer?
No, I was just kidding. This is sex toy.
Maybe in the refrigerator down there at Twining, like some other stuff?
Any other comments, questions? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Abramson?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Bylick?
Yes.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Block, could you take all of number 4?
Sure, I move to approve change order number GC01001 to Premier Builders Incorporated for contract number 1, renovations to Council Rock High School North Secured Entry Project in the credit amount of $8,433. I move to approve change order number 1 to Sargent Enterprise Incorporated for the Richboro Middle School floor finish replacement project in the credit amount of $2,266.42. I move to approve change order number 01 to Sargent Enterprise Incorporated for the Wrightstown Elementary School floor finish replacement project in the additive amount of $117.50. I move to approve change order number GC01-001 to Craft Source Incorporated for contract number 1, Sulfine-Stone Secured Entry and Administrative Addition project in the credit amount of $12,561. I move to approve change order number PC02-001 to Apex Plumbing and Heating Incorporated for contract number 2, Sulfine-Stone Secured Entry and Administrative Addition project in the credit amount of $2,192.80. I move to approve change order number MC03001 to Goshen Mechanical Contractors Incorporated for contract number 3, Sulfine-Stone Secured Entry and Administrative Addition project in the credit amount of $1,135. I move to approve change order number EC04-001 to MJF Electrical Contracting Incorporated for contract number 4, Sulfine-Stone Secured Entry and Administrative Addition project in the credit amount of $3,069.80.
Second.
Thanks, Doug.
Questions for
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor? That project at Sulfine-Stone, they did a really good job, and they were how much behind, or how much ahead of schedule on the final project?
We actually finished a couple months ahead of schedule there.
It looks fantastic.
Thank you, yeah. Turned out nice.
And the total amount of these change orders?
It's a total credit of $29,540.
Great.
Doug, the flooring job at Wrightstown, what was the total cost of that? Do you remember?
I can get you that information. I don't have it.
Ballpark's okay, if you know.
I really don't remember the
Okay.
total contract amount.
Any other questions? Hearing no objection, I ask the motion be recorded as passing by unanimous consent. Ms. McKessie, item number 5.
I move to award the professional services agreement for geotechnical investigations to David Blackmore and Associates at a total cost not to exceed $26,560 for the proposed Newtown Middle School, subject to audit.
Second.
Questions for Mr. Taylor? Doug, I think it's fair to do a quick overview on this one.
Yeah, this is the geotechnical study for the potential project at Newtown Middle School. We had talked a little bit about this back when we first approved the architect and the team, that there would be some additional cost relative to the site studies, the existing conditions site survey. This is the piece that specifically brings the team on board to do the subsurface condition study to see what exactly is happening relative to soils conditions, rock, water, which will help us and the architect in determining the best location for the building and making sure that we are carefully considering where a potential project could live and what cost impact there could be to a potential project should we move forward. So again, this will help us very early determine if we would hit bedrock, if we would hit unsuitable soils, could there be a major amount of soils exchange if the building went where it was proposed because the soils are unsuitable to bear the capacity of new construction. Would we hit bedrock at a shallow depth, which would require ripping or blasting of rock, which could be an expensive foundation for the building, and maybe it would be better suited on top of the hill. We would do some very early preliminary studies to understand those things and help us make sure our numbers are within reason. And again, this is broken into two pieces so that we only approve the initial investigations and not the supplementary work which we would do should the project move forward. So it is $26,560. Phase 1 is $10,750, which is the piece we would ask them to move forward with initially.
How long does that take to come back to us?
It's going to depend upon the team's scheduling of their equipment and how soon they can come out to do what they need to do, but generally I would say it's within a month.
So,
Once they're actually mobilized.
if we're having a discussion about what is the impact of that?
It won't impact the project necessarily as much as it will where the building lives, how the building's designed, what's best. Is it, again, it's just to help us make the right decision.
There's no chance that they're going to come back and say, you can't build?
No, I would highly doubt that would
But
be.
there's also no chance you'll have that back.
We will not have that back in November, no.
So that, I'm just saying, if it were to come back that said,
You
for whatever
can't
reason,
build.
I'm not expecting it, but if it were to come back and say, you can't build another building on this property, for us to have a conversation on November 6th, that might,
I would, I really don't believe that that's even a,
okay, I don't think so either, but
Right.
it was worth asking the question. I just
yeah,
wanted to hear
no,
you
it's a
say
fair
it.
question, but,
But it could-
what it means is, again, you build buildings in many places. There's buildings where you have to drill concrete caissons to 50 feet till you hit bearings. So you're building caissons at intervals of 25 feet and putting grade beams in to support the building. Or you're putting a strip footing into 3 feet. So what it's going to tell us is where is it going to be, what kind of foundation would it be, and how could it affect the budget that we've established. So again, it's not going to tell us we can, it's going to tell us what the impact is to the project.
And it could substantially impact the budget.
Again, I think the budget, as we've talked about, is a budget that does have some contingencies before, early on, so we can do these investigations, and the budget will be reeled in to some degree, so we need to make sure what those conditions are so we can tighten the budget up. So I don't think it's going to go the other direction, if that's your question.
No, it's just a concern. I'm wondering why this wasn't part of the original budgeted process. I understand the environmental study that we had to approve last time, because there was some kind of wildlife discovered that we weren't allowed to know what that was.
I can answer that, because this is a third. We wouldn't want the design team necessarily doing this. Generally, the people that do these investigations for us, as directly for the owner, we bid this, So we've gotten proposals from several professional firms. They would also likely be the people, since they would do the initial studies, would assist us through the construction phase and help us to continue to work directly for us to do soils testing and other testing as we move forward. Since they're kind of doing the preliminary work, it makes sense to keep them on board working directly for us as our eyes and ears for testing the capacity of soils and the other things that they would do as the building's constructed. So it's an agent for us.
I'll just say for me, I don't mean to be capricious about this, but I voted for the preliminary study of this site, and I kind of feel like I'm getting chipped away at it. So for me, just for those reasons, and maybe it's not sound, and maybe it's not logical, but I'll be voting no.
I just want to say for the record, that evening I did mention that there would be other costs associated with the existing conditions study. So it was probably 11:30 at night, but I did say it.
Don't take it personally. I'm not questioning your integrity or your methods here. It's just for me, I'm not sold on this project. Like I said before, I don't think I ever will be, but for me, I'm stopping here.
I just had a quick fact question. So how deep do they go, and how many wells or holes do they drill in doing this kind of a survey?
There's various tests. There's probes and there's actual drilling, and they'll go to auger refusal. Generally, they'll go fairly deep till they hit refusal, and then they'll also go, if it's shale, they'll tell you how far they go till they actually hit bedrock, and they'll give you an actual profile of the soils conditions to show you exactly what the conditions are. We'll do some test pits as well, so we can dig some test pits just to kind of see what's happening within the soil itself. And we'll give those locations to them on a plan so they understand exactly where they're performing those tests. And there's a number of those that we own. They'll also do some perk testing to make sure that the soils are permeable, depending on what we decide to do from a stormwater standpoint with the project.
It's your recommendation that we vote on this total not to exceed amount as opposed to in stages?
It is. We're only going to authorize the initial study if November 6th or whenever that date the board decides to move forward. We wouldn't move forward with phase 2 regardless at that point, because we would want to see, based on where the building design goes and where we might learn about some new structures or things that could happen, some additional testing we would want to perform our due diligence as we'd move forward. So that second half is kind of some additional testing once we learn more about the actual physical design, to go out and do a couple more samplings. So, because you're not going to hit all the spots. You might have structures, you might have roads, you might have cuts that you have to perform for different pieces of the site. This would give us the ability in phase 2 to go out and do those additional tests based on unit pricing.
All right, so regardless then, we're going to be doing both phases. That's a given?
Phase 2 would only be a given if you authorize the project to move forward.
Okay, but we're voting on it tonight for the not to exceed, so I'm asking why not just vote on phase 1?
I suppose, again, I suppose we could, and then, recognizing that we're going to come back with a phase 2, 2B, 3 for the for the architect, for the construction manager, for the testing. I'm trying to simplify some pieces of this. We wouldn't authorize the second half of that work unless we actually move forward, so their contract would never be billed in total. It's a not to exceed number. But if you're uncomfortable with that, we can certainly approve it as the 10,750
Well, I'm just concerned
at this
that
point.
if we vote on this contract, are we committing ourselves to both phases under the terms of the contract?
Only if I'd authorize more testing than we're asking them to do in phase 1, which I certainly would not. So.
And the other thing is, I haven't gone through this whole thing, but there's something in here, and I saw with regard to an estimate of costs, trying to find the page number, and give me a second. It doesn't have a page number, that's why. But there's the estimate of cost, it says $22,900 plus 22,000, an estimate of cost of $22,500 plus an additional $500. So I'm wondering why the not to exceed is 26,560. Shucks. It's at near the end of the contract.
Page 5 lists professional fees.
Yeah, that's page 5, but toward the end of the contract, it had an estimate of costs.
I'm not seeing the
Can we
number.
also just make this subject to solicitor review?
Sure. The one thing I would say, Mr. Abramson, is that section 8.2 allows the owner to terminate for any or no reason upon 7 days written notice. So
We're covered.
I don't think your concern about inadvertently getting sucked into the second phase, I don't think that should be a significant concern to you. The district can get out of this contract on short notice.
Yeah, the page I'm looking at, it looks like it's near the end of the contract, if I could show it to the solicitor. Yeah, maybe you could take a look at that.
It's under the proposal.
Yeah, estimate of cost, it's not the true page 5.
But that's superseded by the provisions of the agreement itself.
Well, it's a $3,000, looks like a $3,000 difference, so.
Because
5.1, section 5.1 has the matching number. That's the number I saw.
So I've just asked that the motion be amended to say subject to solicitor review on that.
And that's fine, but section 913 of the document sets forth the priority of the various contract documents. The main contract has priority over the RFP, which has priority over the proposal itself. So the contract amount not to exceed is the number that would apply.
So, Ms. McKessie, will you accept the amendment to the motion under solicitor's view? And who seconded? Mrs. Brooks, did you? No, Mr. Black. Oh, Mr. Valley? Well, whoever.
I don't remember.
4 of us did because Jerry
That's
wasn't.
right.
Well, will you accept the amended motion?
Well, we should find out who the second was. Can you tell us who the second? There you go.
Yes,
Yep.
you're agreeable?
I am.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is amended to say under solicitor's review. Other comments, questions? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Abramson?
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Bialik?
No?
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grubb? Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Thomas?
Yes. Mrs. Sexton, item number 6.
Oh, this is just what he's been talking to me about here. I move to approve the house tract farmland lease as is contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Questions for Mr. Taylor?
I'm still new here, especially compared to this agreement. But it's $90 per acre per year. It's not a lot of money.
I didn't negotiate this. This is a renewal of an
No, but
agreement that's been in place for 10 years, so
Is that the same amount that it's been?
it's the same that it's been.
Yeah,
It
but
needs to go up.
yeah, it seems like a low amount, but then also I would be curious whether the community in that neck of the woods would have any other desire, or whether we could provide, open space, running space, paths, bird watching, whatever, other than honestly growing turf. I mean, it kind of looks nice when you drive by it. It's very beautiful.
They
Turf.
grew some corn this year, too.
Yeah, well, I just.
Price of turf has gone up.
Right. Anyway, I'm not that into growing turf, so I'm a no.
Has there been any conversation about trying to renegotiate? I mean, I would suggest that that's been in place for 10 years, and we're not asking for more, that we might think about asking for more.
Can certainly go back and talk to them about it if that's the desire of the board. I guess the other side to look at is they're maintaining that land and keeping it nice while it sits unoccupied. So
No, they're also
it
making
could
money
just
off of
grow
it,
and.
So there's a mutual benefit, so I'm with you, but just given the
Yeah, sure, I can go back and.
last time I think I would. And also, just another question. If somebody decided they wanted to use that land, let's just say a soccer tournament on that nice turf, and there was revenue generated, I would assume we have purview over the use.
We could.
Where we get the revenue? Or is is that?
We could not work on top of their product. We would have
They
the,
decided to. A lot of turf farms do that. So my question is, if that arrangement ever came up there, would we be the ones in charge of that, or would they, as the lessee, be the ones who would get?
Rob, do you want to answer that, or do you want me? I mean, I generally know that they have the right to finish with that crop. So if they have grass growing and it's a product that they can sell, we either have to pay them for that product at market rate or allow them to.
The district does not have the right under this lease to the use of that property.
No, but can they sublease?
Yeah,
Can they- can they
that's
make
a
other-
better way to put it. Sorry.
Give me a minute.
So while he's looking, last Friday.
No, they do not. They have to occupy the land throughout the lease and farm it for sod in a good and farm-like manner.
Last Friday, 3 of us went, saw that house barn, climbed in the barn. Mr. Taylor encouraged us to go up a very rickety ladder and into the top of the barn because it was beautiful. And we got a real picture back into the history of Bucks County farming, and it really was something to see. Creepy as it was. It was really, truly something to see. And then just to stand out on that land and look around and see how beautiful it was. It's really something.
Can I ask a question before we move on our vote? You know, we talked about, and I want to commend your conversation with the Bucks County Community College and your presentation. I think that's a fantastic potential you have with the Achieve program. But is there an agricultural curriculum at Bucks County Community College that maybe we could partner with this property? Because it really, this is taking nothing away from Superior Turf. It's a for-profit organization that we're basically gifting this land to year after year for a very small.
I could check, I don't think
It's
so.
public land.
Del Val is the one, Delaware Valley is the agricultural college that was commissioned from the state years and years ago.
Sure.
I can find out.
Yeah, but they're a little farther away, so I don't know if there's
Yeah, I
anything
don't
at
think they would
the community
be
college, but they, maybe we have a discussion with them about it.
So my question for the board is, all this talk about leasing, and will we have any consideration to sell this property?
I'm sorry, I missed that question. I was discussing the lease with Mr.
Right, there's been a lot of that going on tonight. I didn't ask you, I just am saying, is there any appetite, I mean, we're talking about leasing it, we're not getting it, maybe giving it to somebody, to a college use, is there any appetite to sell the property?
Well, I wasn't suggesting giving it to a college. I was suggesting letting the college use the property for their agricultural curriculum instead of leasing it to a
Yeah,
for-profit.
I'm sorry, but that, when, you're not suggesting we charge the college for it?
I'm not, no.
Okay, that's what it, so that's what I'm saying, it's non-revenue producing.
Correct.
Okay.
Or community use or.
Or community use, I'm just asking if another alternative, is there any consideration to sell the property?
So that land is money in the bank. It can be for sale today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Maybe it turns into a school someday. I don't know it will depend on so many factors that we don't know. You'll have to see over the next 5 and 10 years what your financial needs are and whether that land is money in the bank that you're going to want to use, or you can maintain it, keep it as it is. Along with other things, we have resources that can go towards keeping our taxes at a reasonable level so people can continue to live in their homes. Unless the legislature changes and does some miraculous thing.
Well, my thought was along the train wreck theory.
Right, so
you know.
along the train wreck theory, it's not going anywhere right now. And it's one more ball in the air that you need to catch and decide about.
Okay, so the question would be, how much is that ball worth?
Yeah.
Do we know what the property's worth, and maybe it makes sense to have it appraised? Maybe we do that every year, and we probably should if we don't.
Well, that's my question, if we have an appetite, then we
Well,
do
we have
it.
no
Yeah.
idea. How can you decide if
You
you're going to
gotta
sell
pay for an
something if you don't know how
appraisal,
much?
that's all.
How much can a real estate appraisal cost for? I mean,
We did another one that cost quite a bit of money, but.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
That was on the audit 2 years ago. Bob, didn't we say we needed to start to
Appraise.
appraise, to value our assets on an annual basis?
Yes, our buildings and such, yes. I will tell you, this will be the historical cost basis, so it won't be the market value when we appraise things when it comes to land. We do appraise the replacement value of buildings and things like that for insurance purposes. Land, we don't reappraise all the time. We have for accounting purposes, it's the historical cost basis, not the market value. So for our purposes, I'd only use the historical cost basis of the land.
I'd be interested, as Mr. Violet would, just curious as to what approximate market value would be. I agree with, I think, Mrs. Sexton as well around, it's a liquid asset. Typically would probably only appreciate, and it's good to have as we work through all these other issues.
Well, we also have to look at, I think it's Ricetown Township, right? Yes. If anybody knows. We'd have to look at how it's zoned and what the effect is of the school population, right? Because we're looking at all these classroom efficiencies, and if that becomes a few hundred townhomes, it'll change things.
There's lots of things to consider. It's just one of the things we haven't talked about in planning, and, I hadn't formed an opinion myself. I was just putting it out there to see if others had.
I don't
Mrs.
see how
Brooks?
you could sell it at this point in time without other answers as to where we're going in the big picture.
Okay.
That's
Mrs.
exactly
Brooks?
what I was going to say. I mean, whether or not I would be in favor of selling that would be so dependent on other decisions that we haven't made yet.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the lease?
Yep.
The term of the lease shall begin on the 30th day of June 2014 and shall remain in force in effect until the 30th day of June 2017. And the agreement is entered into on the 16th day of October 2014.
That's okay.
That's okay?
Yes, that is okay. The agreement is retroactive, so it sets the rent for the interim time period and sets the rights of the parties under the lease back to that date.
What lease have they been working under from June until now? What agreement have they been working under?
That I have not seen.
Doug, do you have that? Do you have the existing lease with you?
I don't.
I think we're going to need to see that, to see what the provisions are, since if it did expire, does it continue year to year or monthly? Because if it automatically...
It's a 3-year, I believe it's a 3-year lease, similar to the way this was. It's
And what happens upon the termination?
I don't know. I'd have to see the language and defer to
I think we need to see
Rob on that.
before voting.
Do we want to table this then?
Yes.
Well,
So-
unless the solicitor has any input about that.
Well, I haven't seen that document, so I don't know what it says. I don't know what the term on the prior or current lease is. This lease, if approved by the board and signed by the parties, would take precedent over that document, but again, I haven't seen it. I will point out that this lease as drafted allows the district to sell the property, notwithstanding the fact that there is, that it's subject to this lease. And it provides for the tenant to be compensated for the loss of its crop in that event.
So if the district decides they want to lease it to somebody else, can we cancel that lease and wait for them to get their crops off?
Yes.
Is Wildflower Preserve interested? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yes, the district can
Maybe
terminate and then either grant
Move
a
their
period
poison
of
ivy. Yeah.
time for the tenant to remove its crop or pay the tenant for its crop.
So I've heard a lot of ideas. I think we need to be clear what we want the district to go back and do. So one is, I heard that we want to renegotiate for more money on this lease. The second is, are we asking the district to go back and reach out to people and ask them?
Well, on Mr. Block's point, if we're going to go back and ask for more money, I think it's got to be the market rate. So we have to find out what Superior Turf and other turf farms are paying per acre for areas in Bucks County. Because I don't want to just double it and make it $180 an acre. So they should be paying market rate to us, to the public, for the public land. My point was, I asked Mr. Klein, just for your record, to go to Bucks County Community College, and he had a Del Val to look if there's an agricultural, a farm-type program that may want to use the land at no cost.
So reach out to a college, ask them, and then Dr. Foster, what was your request?
I guess it's a request from the community. If people have an idea for this property that would serve the community, now's a good time to come forth and mention it.
I think the community, at least the Wrightstown community, would say if you're going to close Wrightstown, build a new school on that track.
Right.
The school community would say that.
Right.
Obviously, not the entire.
But short of that, like, you know, do they need any more open space for whatever purpose, whether it's soccer or what have you?
Okay, so we're going to ask the administration to go back, try to negotiate whatever market value is and find that out, and then also to check with Del Val if they'd have a use for the land, and then bring this information back to us. Correct? We need a motion to table. We need a motion to table. Need a second?
Second.
Motion tabled. Okay, moving on to item number 7. Dr. Foster?
I move to approve the independent contractor agreement with Entrance Systems Incorporated for the replacement of select glass window units as described in the agreement for the Maureen M. Welch Elementary School at a cost not to exceed $19,100, subject to audit.
Second?
Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, this is something we discussed back in August when we had a facilities meeting. And we talked about the 44 units of glazing at Welsh that were, the units had failed, so they're kind of foggy with the glass. And we said, let's get those replaced as part of this project. And we got a price from the contractor that was performing the work at the time, and his number appeared to be a little high. So we went out and we talked to another subcontractor who does this work. And they provided us with a better number. There is an allowance in their number in the event that some of the trim that they have to remove to get the glass out is damaged while they're doing the work, so then they would replace that trim. They believe that they will be able to get most of that off and reinstall it without replacing it. If that's the case, their work will be a lot closer to $12,000 than it would be the $19,000. So I'm recommending that we execute this agreement with that contractor as opposed to paying a change order to the current contractor.
Comments, questions? Mr. Taylor? Can I roll call vote, please?
Dr. Foster,
Yes.
Mrs. McKessie,
Yes.
Mrs. Sexton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Block,
Yes.
Mr. Abramson,
Yes.
Mrs. Brooks,
Yes.
Mr. Bilek.
Yes.
Mr. Abramson, can you take both items in item number 8?
I move to approve the Holland Elementary School Parent-Teacher Organization's donation of $10,169.95 toward the purchase of a classroom set of 30 iPads, pads, and iPad Power Sync cart. The total cost of the purchase is $14,169.95. And I move to approve the Hillcrest Elementary School Parent-Teachers Organization's donation of $6,000 for the estimated cost of the placement of a mosaic mural in the Hillcrest Elementary School main lobby in honor of the school's 25th anniversary.
Second.
Questions?
What's the mural going to be?
Hillcrest is celebrating their 25th anniversary. When visitors to Hillcrest came in for the 25th anniversary party, they made certain stars. The rest of the kids will make it, and I'm sure they'll contract out with one of the ladies who does all of our murals in the schools to do a mural presentation in the front of the school for their 25th anniversary. It's estimated, because it's hard to know right now until you fire it all up, what it's all going to cost to do.
Thank you to the PTOs.
Yes.
Yes.
The PTOs decide on their own what the equipment, what types of equipment they're going to purchase. Is that how it works?
I'm sure the principals give them input, and so it wasn't unusual as I was an elementary school principal, Joy could comment too, where the PTO came in and said, we're looking this year to do something that might be technology oriented, what do you think? And there are always staff liaisons that sit in the PTO meetings that might represent what the needs of the staff might be.
I'm just curious as technology evolves, and I feel like I'm channeling Mr. Krupp here, but iPads are probably the most popular, certainly the most popular tablet, but there's other more, well, at least as efficient, least expensive options, less expensive options. So I'm wondering if again, I don't want to get nitpicky in how the PTOs choose what they're buying, but.
Agreed. One of the things that iPads do, however, that are different than some of the other options is they have some integration work with education uses, and they have particularly for high needs populations, they have built-in translation software and things like that that are a little different than what you can get from some of the Microsoft products. But I think they are, I agree with you, Mr. Violek, I think they're beginning to integrate pretty quickly, so they're a seamless exchange. There's not a lot of difference.
Thank you.
Hearing no objection, I ask the Secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. Solicitor's report.
There will be an executive session following the meeting to discuss a personnel item. Attached to the solicitor's report is my memo on the timeline for making a decision to close a school if the board decides to venture down that path. And I had looked forward to pointing out to Mr. Grupp my footnote 1, which addresses...
He's listening. He's been writing to us.
addresses the judicial treatment of how to define a school closure, but I'll have to circle back with him another time on that. Otherwise, I don't have anything to add to that report.
Any board items? Sorry, board items tonight? No? Moving on to public comment. Public comment's an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching the broadcast on CRTV. It's our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of the public have an opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. Please step to the mic, state your name and your town. Thank you.
Tara Wigington, Ivy Land for the Achieve program. Many of the parents are not available next week, I know the students, because we've been invited to the Miracle League fundraiser. So I just wanted to bring up tonight some comments regarding Mr. Klein, your presentation. You had asked that the parents be patient, and we have. However, the board needs to take into consideration that based on the map that was proposed, you're moving the students to an area that is 1,200 square feet smaller. And most important, the area now dedicated back to LSAC and the new Achieve space will have to share the same restroom. There's only one restroom on that side of the building. I don't know who's going to pay for an additional restroom, and Council Rock may no longer be looking at a $304,000 savings if it needs to put in another restroom. And is it really economically feasible to do any more additional leasehold improvements when the plan is to vacate the premises in 1 year? What I'm saying is this appears to be simply another Band-Aid of which the adhesive is going to quickly disintegrate. Over the last month, I have shared with the board and the administration the success of this program. It has become a model for other districts to replicate for their transition population. You must consider the fact that in 1 year the program has doubled in size. I shared earlier this evening with Dr. Lambert that over the past several weeks I have been contacted by numerous 11th grade parents. That's where their students, where their child are going to forego their 12th year and are planning on sending their children to Achieve. You are going to have a greater number of students showing interest in Achieve than those that are phasing out in September 2015. I have heard that the program caps at 25, but I would love to hear how you propose to a parent that the enrollment is on a first-come, first-served basis. I would like to make a motion that the most recent proposal of the Bucks County Community College be explored for the 2015 and 16 year and not put it off another year. If you do your homework, the district will see that they are not going to be able to accommodate the upcoming population in the new LSAC location. Thank you.
Mrs. Whittington, before you go, number one, I'm happy to walk you through the new space. It's actually larger than the space where Achieve is right now, and we would never double up the bathroom space. When that partition is made, it would be on the new tenants to do whatever they needed to do to put in bathroom facilities.
Has that been discussed with LSAC, that they'll put in another restroom?
That's been absolutely their process and protocol every time they've taken over another sliver of space.
That they'll put in the restroom?
They will.
And not council?
For new tenants, sure. Yeah, that we would never share that facility with anybody other than our chamber.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Stephanie Barrier-Terrace from Wrightstown. I was expecting coming into tonight that the board would have more discussion about the proposal for the Wrightstown Elementary closure. I thought Mark Klein took us through the presentation last week, and that because there wasn't time for discussion, or not there wasn't time, there wasn't the AV working, so that led to the decision not to have discussion last week around that particular piece of the closure. I thought of the proposals, I thought there would be discussion. I had sent in a number of questions to the email address. I know Mr. Klein received them, I know Ms. Brooks received them, and so since there wasn't an interest or time tonight to have some of those questions addressed, I'd like to request that it be discussed at the next meeting. And the questions are centered on the Wrightstown closure, because what I heard from the board tonight is there are some members who are still pursuing the option to close Wrightstown. So if you're going to continue to put that forward and perhaps go for a vote, I will focus in on two questions that I have for you. The first question is the model that was presented, Newtown Elementary, as well as two other elementary schools, would be above the current capacity. So again, we haven't seen the presentation online, so I'm just going from my notes, but Newtown Elementary, I believe, would be at 37 classrooms above the current capacity of 35 classrooms. So my specific question to the board, and I'll try and be more concise next time, but my specific question to the board is, if you were to move our children from Wrightstown Elementary to Newtown Elementary and other schools, and those schools are above capacity, what is the option? What do you intend to do to fit those kids into those schools? Are we talking additional trailers? Are we talking keeping trailers online? Are we talking some other solution that isn't apparent to us? But I feel it's only fair to those of us in the community that you all as a board address what option you would use in order to house those kids when the model shows there are not enough classrooms at those receiving elementary schools. My second piece is if some of those options involve spending money or modifications, that those be modeled out and that the savings for closing be done, be looked at in a net present value calculation along with the expenditures. Because at the end of the day, this is all about spending money. So if under some scenario, the district needs to expand capacity at the receiving schools, use additional trailers, keep trailers, I'd like to know what that is and at what cost that is. So I'll make a request that perhaps there are some discussion and from the board on this matter next week. Thank you.
Jenny Shop-Miller from Wrightstown. Just a couple of things. I mean, I think the idea of Wrightstown being K-4 or K-1, either one of those could work. I have a preference that I have. I think it's an interesting position for our community to be in, to be able to say, here's two options that could fit our kids without trailers, and for us to be thinking about that. I like the idea of our kids being kept separate if our 5th and 6th graders go to Newtown. Not that they're separate within the school, they're not any more separate than any other kid in a classroom, but they're at least with the kids that they've known for the last 5 years, and still go into the cafeteria, go into gym and all those things, but to sprinkle our kids all throughout all the other 5th and 6th grade, I think would be a little bit harder on them. One of the things when I was presenting, sort of coming up with my plan, as I talked to a lot of parents, and the issue came up of if for some reason you did adopt 5th and 6th grade centers, doing it in a year would be very difficult on our community. And so I just would like to throw out there the idea of considering giving our students a year to plan. When our 6th grade graduates, a lot of stuff is done at the beginning of the year to plan for this being their last year at the elementary school. So if this is announced in the middle of the year, it's a little bit short notice for anything to happen this year. for this to be their last year at Wrightstown. Not that that's the only factor, I know. One thing is that, I still think that would be valuable to look at other grade configurations, because the plans that were discussed tonight, while they make the kids fit in the schools without trailers and all 10 schools open, there's still not a lot of significant additional efficiencies, things that you could achieve when you change the grade structure, and I'm hopeful that that would still be considered. I wanted to just mention about the 1,600 kids. We're not down 1,600 kids, it's like 14 something. But at the elementary level, it's actually only 700. And in that time, we've taken off 28 elementary school trailers, which hold about 700 kids. I know we've added some classrooms, but we still have kids in atypical spaces. And when I watched the video of Schrader presenting that, he said that is not appropriate. Those spaces are not properly ventilated. They weren't not built to be occupied spaces. And it doesn't sound like that's a really great thing. So I really support the idea of the board looking at the efficiencies. Because Schrader also said that was what he presented was a snapshot. That wasn't a solid, this is your capacity forever of those buildings as long as they exist. You change how you use the buildings, you change your capacity. So look at that. Look at that and see how are you going to use those buildings, and then figure out what the capacity is. You could do that once you've made that decision as a board. So I think that would be a great idea. Thanks.
My name's Adrienne Vance, Wrightstown. I hadn't intended to speak this evening, but I believe that it's reasonable to have a grave concern and even maybe question that there are maybe some personal agendas at play here that are with board members that are clearly making decisions without facts. And I say without facts because it's been evident in this meeting and previous meetings that the board and the superintendent can't even seem to come to agreement on what the correct figures and facts are in a variety of things. And as a taxpayer, a parent, and a voter, I want to know that when the community elected you and supports you, we should have faith in the decisions that you make, and we should believe that those decisions are based on facts. The definition of a fact is indisputable evidence, a piece of information that's indisputable. If you can't all agree on what that indisputable information is, we shouldn't be making decisions that are going to affect and disrupt students and schools. We should be working on what are the facts and coming to the conclusion and the agreement that everyone finds them to be indisputable, and then make the decisions based on that. To rush into a decision to just say we've got something done is foolish, illogical, and irresponsible as an elected official for the community itself. You are supposed to provide leadership for us. You're supposed to represent the community. And if we're rushing in to say, hey, I got something done this year, or hey, look what we did next year, it's irresponsible. Yes, there needs to be progress. Yes, there are things that are going to happen that aren't acceptable, people aren't going to be happy with. There are always change and decisions that need to be made. But to be a responsible individual and a responsible leader at home, in the community, at work, at school, it's to make those decisions on appropriate choices based on facts and logic. And when we're rushing just for the sake of saying that we accomplished something, in the long term, you don't accomplish anything. Oftentimes, you wind up making the situation worse. So I would like you to take that into consideration, that maybe we need to focus on specifically what you can all find in agreement and then work from there, instead of this pitting against everybody. Thank you.
Good evening. John Rashay, Wrightstown Township. I started coming to these board meetings in 2004. I was here in 2007. I know some of you were on the board at that time. At that time, taxpayers were asked in 2007 to pay between $25,000 and $50,000 for a pair of studies. At that time, that study for student projections showed that elementary school enrollment was going to decline. Was going to decline by about 700 students. So you can imagine my frustration after the board that got that information did nothing with it in terms of making sure that we had the right number of schools. You could imagine my frustration sitting through a meeting like this where we're hearing people say, well, now we need an efficiency study, or now we need something else. Because what I'm worried is going to happen is this board's just going to kick it down the can and wait till there's another election, and then a whole new bunch of board members can say, well, I haven't been here long enough to know what the answer is. Well, what surprised me is I thought 2007 was the first study. But according to a 1997 article in the Philadelphia Inquirer, decisions were being made in the 1995, 1996, 1997 area, which was basing a study showing that Council Rock's enrollment was going to go from 11,563 students in 1996-97 to a total of 13,253 students in 2006-2007. Big gain, right? So let's build Maureen Welch. Let's build Council Rock South for a projected enrollment that is 2,000 more students than we have now. We have fewer students than we did before we built Maureen Welch. We have fewer students than we had before we built Council Rock South. Explain to any rational taxpayer who understands third grade mathematics why we need as many schools as we do if we have fewer students than before we built 2 new schools. We haven't needed as many schools as we have since 2007. We don't need as many schools as we have today. Stop pussyfooting around. Do your job. You're here to be stewards for our money. As duly elected officials, you have the right to reach into my pocket and take tax money. With that comes the responsibility of spending it wisely. It's been way too long that we have been overpaying for the schools we have in this district because there's too many of them. And if it takes another administration to figure out how to fit the right kids in the right size buildings, get another administration. The taxpayers do not elect the administration. The taxpayers elect you. You select the administration. If they can't do it, the taxpayer's problem isn't with the administration. The taxpayer's problem is with the board. I, for one, refuse to go through another year of hearing, well, we have to put this off because some people are going to get offended. I, as a taxpayer, have been offended for plenty long, and I don't deserve to be offended for any longer. Thank you.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. My notes are almost the same as John's. We've watched for 8 years for the enrollment to go down. You were presented with the facts. Some of you chose to go along to at least learn things while we on the committee were learning things, and others decided to wait it out till the end. So now if you feel pressure, that's because of how you decided to attack the problem. Well, we had housewives who would stayed at home and read 90 pages of reports and came back and tried to sort it out with us. I was amazed at all the work that the committee did. All right, Goodnow. Goodnow has 2 more classrooms. We know that for a fact. We could look at the Schrader report, and they say that the 100% capacity is 920. We can look at PlanCon, Act 34 hearing. The FTE is 1,075. If you do not put more students in Goodnow, it'll be down 187 students from what Schrader says is 100%. We have 3 schools, Newtown, Holland, and Goodnow, that'll be down almost 200 students if you do not fill it up. You are ignoring the cost per student that the one study did. Schrader, when he went to the principals, said, how do you use your schools? I'm thankful that the administration finally said to the principals, how can you make your school work if we take off the trailers? It's a different question. It looks to me that what was proposed tonight is that we're spending more money than we're saving. I'd have to look at all the slides. But once again, I want the students to have computers. I want the schools to have access points. I want the students to have a quality education. And that is why I am here. I'm sorry that a school has to close. I cried when my school closed, but my students were fine. I went through it. And if I had a kid today, the one school I really want them to go to would be Goodnow, even though it's going to be the biggest schools. It has a dynamite staff. It has teachers that care about technology, teachers who wait weeks to get the technology in their classroom because they don't have enough. It's going to have 2 more classrooms, and in 2010, when that school was planned, it has 100 less now, and there was 79 special ed students. This year, there's like 46, and 15 of them are in 6th grade. So there's going to be a lot less. We know what Goodnow is going to look like. We don't have to wait until the building is finished and physically walk around the rooms. They're going to have 53 teaching stations. 6 of them are going to be rooms that are divided with very fancy dividers that cost a lot of money. They can fit a lot more students. If you choose not to put them there, then choose it. If you choose not to close the school, then do it. That is up to you. But I am saying that the numbers say that the children will fit. I am saying that the Platt property, which was Newtown Swim Club, we have no evidence other than the evidence of the Rutgers study that was presented by the engineer that there would be 18 school-age children for what the cost of the house and how it's marketed and the size of the house. That could be wrong. You have to make the decision on the facts, as this lady said, that you know now. Thank you.
Jason Funk, Wrightstown Township. First, I just want to start off and say that apparently housewives can do much better math than some of the folks on the committee. They didn't miss 69 students. Okay, fair enough. What I will say as well, I just wanted to say that, you know, I keep hearing a lot about enrollment is down, enrollment is down. I get it. Overall, enrollment is down. But we're talking about closing an elementary school. And if, again, the numbers show, very small, but enrollment at the elementary school level is up, and it continues to go up month after month. Now, not only that, the Pell study, again, that this board utilized to come up with their decisions and recommendations to close an elementary school was off by 100 students at the elementary level for this year. 100 students. Where are we going in the future? We talk about the Platt property where there's townhomes. I get it. You know, they're $500 townhomes. It's going to be these. It's not a 55 and over development. Okay. I don't know when the last time the folks on the board bought a home, but house prices, they're not cheap. Brand new townhomes, new developed townhomes, they're $500,000 in this school district. I'm sorry, but they are. The other thing too is, you look at the Melsky tract. Again, we talked about this before in meetings before. You've got 90 homes that Toll Brothers can build on there. You want to sell the Howe tract. You got 70 some odd homes that could be built on the Howe tract if you sell that lot. Where are these kids going to go when these lots are developed? If you close elementary schools now, think about it. You're going to have this, you talk about we're going to have the same issue year over year. Well,
you're going to have a much larger issue if you close schools, you get rid of properties, and then you have to build new schools on top of that. So I mean, I guess I'm just curious. I mean, we saw a presentation last week. Everyone talks about, I want to see the numbers. I want something that shows me that we can't close an elementary school and redistrict. I'm fairly certain that Mr. Klein showed that last week. You're going to have at least 3 schools that are going to be above 100% capacity. That was the model. That was done. I'm sure that Mr. Klein and the administration did everything they could to make it work. I mean, where was everyone when he was presenting that last week? I was there. That was the conclusion. It didn't work. So I mean, I guess I don't understand why these same questions keep coming up over and over again. And I will say too, as someone from Wrightstown, I liked what we heard tonight. I will say the K-1 idea is going to affect a lot more people because you're basically taking folks from Diamond Drive and you're basically, these kindergartners and first graders, you're going to basically double their bus routes. So my guess is the parents in those areas, Diamond Drive and right across the bypass there, are going to be upset about having kindergartners increase their bus routes by double or close to double. And again, you're going to be impacting a lot of individuals in those 2 schools. If you're going to do anything, the best bet I think truly is what Mr. Klein and the district came up with, which is that K-4. Because, and being from Wrightstown, I get it. There's less folks there, there's less kids in the school, and you're going to be affecting fewer individuals. So again, that's kind of my thoughts for the night, and thank you for telling me.
Take all this with a grain of salt because I'm a housewife. Amy McIntyre, Newtown, on behalf of Wrightstown Elementary School. I would like to get some clarification. I know that you're going to be posting on YouTube the video from last week with a big disclaimer for all of us losers that there's a sound issue so that we will understand that. But I also wanted to just ask, is the presentation going to be posted online so that people can view it that way as well? Because I know you've done that in the past, and that makes it really easy for us to just look at it page by page. I wasn't sure. I'm more than a little disappointed. Last week, you debated for over 20 minutes whether we should get to hear Mr. Klein's presentation, and tonight we heard very little discussion of his presentation and the detailed work that went into it. I'm very confused by people's conclusions that a school can be closed. The model showed that actually more like 5 elementary schools will be overcrowded. It showed that small group instruction rooms will be gobbled up to support general education classrooms. Where is that small instruction going to take place? In hallways, in more atypical spaces like we already do. In some of the schools that would be receiving even more students due to a Wrightstown closure. Newtown specifically would be in a shortage of 2 classrooms. So I can do 3rd grade math, and it's not adding up. And I have heard every week from the same people that enrollment is down. 1,600, 1,400, what have you. In 1999, we have 58 less trailers today, district-wide, than we did in 1999. Times 25 kids per trailer, it's about 1,400, all right? It was trailers. It was trailers. We added some classrooms, we built some schools, but we were able to get our kids inside because enrollment went down. We can't fit these students if we close Wrightstown Elementary School. And I also have to hear every week that it's hard, and it's sad, and nobody likes to close a school. It will never be the right time. And I actually agree with you. I would advocate that Wrightstown should always have a local school, and it never will be a right time to deny that municipality of a local school. But I would also say that there are many people who have been working with me who do come from a more black and white numbers point of view. So there are many people within the community who do feel that if the numbers ever indicated that it was the right time, then okay. The numbers do not indicate that this is the right time. So I would argue that you're right. It never would be the right time to close Wrightstown, but even if we were just looking at the numbers, now is not the time. So I would like to ask you to discuss the details of the presentation and to make it available for the public to see so that they can understand what their schools will look like if Wrightstown is closed, and so that we can get more people from the community involved in this discussion, because they should know that they would be changing elementary schools and going to an overcrowded elementary school to accommodate the kids leaving Wrightstown. And I want our community to be a part of that discussion. And I hope to see the presentation online. And I guess that's it. Thanks.
Okay, we have an executive session, so...
Can I ask a question just after that? I'm sorry. Why isn't that presentation online from last week?
I haven't put it up yet, I'm happy to do so.
Meeting adjourned.
Wait.
Oh.
I have a question. Denise, the next academic standards meeting, I understand you're discussing class size.
Correct.
Most likely I won't be at that due to a trial schedule, but I'm interested, I'll give you my thoughts now. Is the discussion going to be on the research of the class size, or you haven't decided yet? Research or what the...
It will include research. I mean, Joy can speak more to what she's putting together. I tried to poll the board to get some feedback. I haven't heard from everyone yet to help frame the conversation, but for your benefit, that meeting will take place in this room and be recorded, so you won't be able to participate, but you will be able to see the discussion as it really is, rather than just my explanation of it. But Joy, do you want to? I mean, it's still in progress.
Right. We're still trying to determine exactly what the content of that meeting will be, but I have done a little bit of research about class size, and I've also polled neighboring districts to find out what their practice is. So we're going to be presenting information about what's the practice is in neighboring districts for what they do when classes reach the maximum in the elementary schools. And Denise and I have been talking about whether or not we're going to extend the conversation to the secondary schools, and I'm waiting to hear from her. I think she's polled you all.
I sent out an email to the board. I heard from 3 people, so I was just waiting for more feedback. I didn't necessarily want to give it to you in piecemeal, but it is my hope by either tomorrow or the beginning of next week that we'll be able to frame it a little better.
Thanks.
Well, one of my ideas, if you could discuss our class size, elementary school class size guidelines in comparison with other school districts. Not that I'm saying we should be bound by what other school districts are doing, but you may want to look at their SAT scores and when they started their class size guidelines, if it was relatively recent, or is it going back 14 years like we have?
I actually have gathered data from, like I said, neighboring school districts in Bucks County on what their practices, how they handle reducing class size at the elementary level, and I'll be presenting that information. But if you'd like me to also, look up SAT scores and so forth, I can add that to the information.
Thanks.
Okay?
Yeah, if we get the research beforehand, if that's possible, that would be great.
Okay, meeting adjourned.